when I realised that this was going to take me a long time, this was going to be a lifelong endeavour, that I would never be cured from it, but I would have to learn to manage this thing. And once I accepted that this was mine, it's a little bit like a person coming to terms with the fact that they will always, their leg is going to never be there again. They'll never have a left leg. They're always going to have to use a prosthetic. You've got to come to terms with that shit, man. And I had to do the same thing mentally. And once I did, and I came to peace with that, and then a series of like redefining normal, accumulating the tools I need, being prepared to hunt those down and find those, then I think I started fairly squarely down the path to recovery.
Yeah.
You know, there was years leading up to it. You got to do that time of waiting for the miracle cure and trying all the miracle cure before you get to the realization of, oh shit, this is who I am.
Welcome to T is for Trauma. I'm your host, David O'Connor. My guests today are John and Mel King. And in this episode, John talks about how a seemingly innocuous act in 2008 would trigger recall of over a decade of repressed sexual abuse and sex trafficking in his youth. How he would slowly lose his health, career, and family over the next 5 years. How he found healing and community in writing, and how they both practice grace, understanding, and patience in their relationship. John is a lot of things. He is blunt, courageous, unfiltered, honest, unapologetic, inappropriate, and hilarious. He is a truly unique character with a fascinating story. This episode covers a wide range of difficult topics and has strong language throughout. Now, without further ado, please enjoy this weird, wild, and wonderful conversation with John and Melissa King. John, Melissa, welcome to the show.
Hey.
Thanks
nice
for
to
having
be,
us.
man. Yeah.
Every episode begins with gratitude, and today I have a lot to be grateful for. The first being that you have opened your house to me to record this episode. We are near Dallas-Fort Worth. But then also, in terms of the experience that you have shared with the world, there are a lot of different facets that I'm grateful for. You have advocated in a number of different ways, through books, through documentaries, through your foundation. But then you have also been very forthright in your storytelling about abuse in your childhood, sex trafficking, abuse by women. And that is not something that gets represented a lot in our culture. And you've also told it with a boldness and an honesty that I've really appreciated and found very refreshing.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate that. Thank you.
So the place I wanted to start off was that day in 2008. What do you remember about that day?
No, man. Daffodils. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I'd walk to school some days, and there was a particular house just down from where we were living, and they had a dirt berm out the front, and every springtime daffodils would come up. And I suppose in some ways, when I look back, I was counting the years that I was surviving by the number of times I saw daffodils. So every springtime when daffodils would come up, I would stop, I would celebrate, I was just fascinated by these beautiful, beautiful yellow flowers. And in 2008, I think it was a Wednesday or Thursday, I remember walking out of my shed one day where I was riding my rider's shed, beautiful blue sky, and I looked down and the daffodils had just started to come up. And I remember the last thought I had was, what beautiful daffodils. And at that moment, it was like all these little clips of 8mm film that I'd held in my head over different events came together, and it ran like a continuous reel. Wow. And I realized I had all these, I didn't have just memories now, I had this track that was my life. And they'd all came back as one. And I remember for the first time saying, realizing that I had been sexually abused for a very long period of time. As long that my entire childhood was pictures of that. So that was 2008.
I'm curious, you must have encountered daffodils before that day.
Yeah.
And no trigger.
I love daffodils.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, I know, it's really weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I still love daffodils to this day. They're very significant flowers to me. And that's a really interesting thought. Here is something that in some ways was tied up with tracking time chronologically. Of course, tracking time is chronological, but tracking time, seasons, and survival have been, which in some ways would be seen as a negative, is actually their victory to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it is about daffodils. There's just something, they're perennial. They're always there. They always turn up year after year after year. And in some ways that's underpinned every moment of my life since that point, you know?
Yeah. So I wanted to take it all the way back to your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, from your accent, you did not grow up in the U.S.
No, South Texas, mate.
Where did you grow up?
Australia.
Okay.
My last port of call was Sydney.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time in the bush. I put myself through college, mustering sheep and cattle and working on wheat farms. So
Yeah.
my first degree was in agriculture.
And before you had this realization in 2008, how would you have described your childhood?
Oh, brother, fuck. I don't know if I would have. I don't have a lot of memories. I don't have a lot of memories of anything really, and that's been the challenge. I had these memories of what happened come together, but overall, I really don't have. Memory is not something I do well. Obviously it's part of how my brain cope with things. Shut down, move on. Shut down, move on. So I remember some times at the beach. I remember my Nana's house. I remember my Nana. She was like a soft spot in my childhood. Beautiful lady. Played a lot of rugby. Then it's like next is college and, drinking, fighting and fucking my way to prove my masculinity.
The Australian way.
To prove I was a man, mate, because, I was a equal opportunity victim. I was both male and female. And even at college there was cases of sexual abuse by other students and by college professors. And so everything, I was fighting and fucking, man, to prove that I was a man, and especially the homosexual stuff. It's like, dude, that's not me. Why the heck am I attracting this stuff? Because I didn't have any idea.
Yeah.
So I was doing everything I could to try and affirm myself and drown the sorrows and whatever it was.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. Are there any emotions that you associate with childhood, like loneliness or anger or?
No, it's just dead.
Yeah, just avoid.
John describes the first time he got hangry. Like, he can remember that.
Very distinctly.
Yep.
I can remember the first time I lied, and I can remember the first time I got angry. And that first time I got angry, which was in my 20s, I think it was, 23.
Yeah, you said like 23.
23, 24. That was the last time I wasn't angry, if that makes sense. I just remember getting angry and not knowing why, but one day I remember that I just got angry. I got angry at fucking everything and everyone. And it wasn't for 20 years later that I realised, dude, I've spent 2 decades being angry.
Yeah. So it had just turned a tap on and.
Yeah, something just went off. It just. Yeah. And, I fought a lot playing rugby and I fought a lot in college bars. I just fought a lot, And then I took up a very stringent martial arts. And that was one of the best things I did. Or I would have been in jail or killed. I killed someone or killed myself. I realised how easy it was to hurt another human being. And that opened a whole other series of revelation about how easy it is to hurt and be hurt.
Yeah.
And so I look at that in a physical sense, in a martial art. And I think that started to cause these waves in my soul that 20 years later started to manifest in what happened when looking at daffodils.
Yeah.
And it still does. It still resonates.
Yeah, there's a responsibility that comes with a capacity for violence.
Yeah.
And I think if people have not experienced that, probably the most accessible is through a combat sport.
Yeah.
And we had talked a little bit about this off camera about the most dangerous people in any gym or the most dangerous people in the military that you meet are generally the nicest people because they don't have that insecurity about their vulnerability or their fragility.
Yeah.
They have this capacity for violence or for danger that gives an inner calm and an inner confidence.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I think at some way, inherently, it was a little bit of, you'll never fuck with me or mine again. Yeah. And I wanted to tool up. And Australia wasn't a very pro-military nation or pro-police, you know. We're a bunch of criminals, basically. A little bit like Texans. And so it was like, okay, well, I went this way. So I learned a lot of martial, came to America, did a whole lot more martial arts. So I do Krav Maga 4 days a week now because I just, I'm 59. I still love to fight.
Yeah.
I love that set of, like, sharpening, keeping that tool sharp. For me, is some of the best therapy that I can do myself. Keeping myself fit, keeping my tool sharp. Because as you said, like the more confidence you feel in the way to take care of yourself and your family, the more relaxed you are. And when you suffer from PTSD, and particularly from a sexual point of view, it's, I understand military PTSD and police PTSD. There's another element with, being sexually abused where it's everyone's a possible victim. It's not the odd backfire of a car or something else. It's like everyone's a possible perpetrator, and wherever you go and whatever you do, so you're constantly on and being able to, and that's like PTSD. A lot of my military mates are the same. Is if you know you can handle yourself, then it brings a sense of calm because no matter what comes your way, you feel like I can take care of what's mine.
Yeah. It's a very double-edged sword though, because a lot of times with trauma, you get this hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. So like you said, a lot of things appear like a threat even when they're not. So you find yourself in that heightened state in very common everyday situations.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. Supermarkets, restaurants, cafes. There's sometimes we go to sit in a restaurant or a cafe, coffee shop. I just don't go in. I just say, look, we just need to give this one a miss. And, it might... the thing is, if you walk away because you feel uncertain, you never know what might have been. If you're running on an intuition or a paranoia, you don't know. Yeah. But all I know is that if I'm sitting there for the next 40 minutes or so, it's not going to be an enjoyable space for us.
For sure. Yeah.
We went to a seminar this weekend, room full of strangers, noisy,
closed doors.
It was like probably the worst possible scenario for John, but it was important that we both wanted to go. So we asked for some accommodations. We, sat at the back. We did what we needed to do to make it work for us.
And I think that's part of it is once you become aware of what you need on a day-to-day basis is being that self-advocate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important part of recovery and owning that. And that means that you walk into a cafe, if you just can sit at that table over there with your back against that wall, you'll be okay. Facing the door, maybe not so close that you can get away in case something goes down, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you do that as a self-advocate, then you feel like you're in control of a situation. And I think for anyone with PTSD or complex post-traumatic stress, that sense of a little bit of control it's like 20-80 rule. If I feel 20% control, I'm 80% calm. And I think that just helps a little bit.
Yeah. You said a word which I thought you were going to say a different scenario, which for me, and I know for a lot of my military friends, the cinema is actually a place that is very triggering because it's dark. Yeah. You have a lot of people coming in and out. Yeah. It's very loud. And then, there is always just that heightening. And, I always sit in the back. I'm always aware of the exits, et cetera, et cetera. And for a lot of my friends, I know it's the exact same way.
Dude, you walk in there, like, it's all full of these fucking big, burly, bearded pricks. They're all sitting 4 chairs.
You're one to talk, John.
Yeah, really. They're all sitting 4 chairs apart. You go to see like, the Northman. Me and Meeks were going there. We went in there to see this fucking thing, and we're sitting in our big chairs, and there's like 2 down. There's another bearded prick. Up behind us, a bearded prick, and there's like 8 guys in this entire thing, sussing everyone out. You want to go? You want to fucking go? We settle down.
They look like henchmen in a John Wick movie.
It clearly wasn't. The fucking John Wick thing. It's It's fucking funny, man.
We watch a lot of movies at home.
Yeah.
We do.
It's like you said, you make all of these managing decisions to kind of make it work for you. And, like sometimes it means missing out on something that you used to enjoy just because you got to feel that security and that safety.
And I think that the word they're missing out is like, do I really miss out? Like I'm going to go and listen to some kid cry and some prick wrestle his candy pop. I ain't missing out on nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going to sit home with the missus and watch telly. So in my house with my food where I'm safe and we actually can have a good night. Now, do we go out like she loves people and shit like that? And so we do. We do make an effort for it.
Yeah.
But when we do, we communicate about it.
Yeah.
And there are places we go that we know it's okay. It might seem a little boring to other people, but we enjoy each other's company. So the concept of going to the same restaurant a couple of times, 3 or 4 times a year is okay for us because we know the people, we know the restaurant. It's okay because this is the company that's important.
And we are comfortable asking for what we need. If we go in and the hostess wants to seat us in the middle of the room, we say, would you mind actually if we sit over there so he can have his back to the wall?
Right.
And you sort of make that someone else's issue if they have a problem with that, because this is what we need to be comfortable. And it's okay. It's okay for us to ask for that. And
I think that's a big thing. Self-advocacy is a very
yeah.
big part of recovery because you're admitting that you're not well. Now, I hear people want to call it, they don't like PTSD because it's a disorder. They don't like to call it an illness. It's like, seriously, who cares? Yeah. Whatever it is, it's an issue that's facing you mentally. And once you admit that you've got this and you own it, you're not trying to, if you don't find it repugnant and you're not trying to push it away, but once you own it and say, this is who I am, I'm comfortable with who I am, you've got to get comfortable, and then you own the consequences of those things, and then you make a framework and you become different abled as opposed to disabled. And it's like, okay, this is what we need to survive and this works well for us.
Yeah.
And you start to reframe your world accordingly.
Yeah, I think there is a much broader conversation, especially as it relates to your conversation or your relationship that I do want to come back to later in the session. But I did notice this. The first episode for this podcast came out about 3 months ago. And with that came me telling my friend group and the internet about my own history with sexual abuse. And I had a number of people reach out to me from my friend circle to say, hey, I also had this happen in my childhood and I've never told anybody this. But what I realized in talking to a lot of people about that, where they hadn't necessarily confronted it or worked through it. And they were like, hey, this thing happened to me that was really traumatic, but I'm fine. Like, I'm fine. And it was... I got very frustrated and very angry about it.
I love those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine, are you? Yeah, right.
Yeah, but then I had to realize that I was also doing that. Like I was putting on this front of like, hey, you don't need to worry about it. Like I'm working through it. I'm fine. And it was because I did not want people to judge me, that like to think of me as lower or not enough or broken in some way.
Very well said. I wrote a poem about it, and it's like you feel like your excrement smeared on a holy altar. You just feel, and you feel like people can smell the stain on you.
Yeah.
And they look at you. And for the first 5 or 7 years, that was the thing. I knew everywhere I went, everyone looked at me and said, oh, that's that guy was fucked as a kid. It's like, and it just, it follows you around like a smell. And, I still think it's the case.
No one wants to think that everybody else is looking at them thinking about their diminished capacity because they can't cope with this or they can't do that. And so I think you have to turn those things around and, and say, these are the things I need to function as a human in society. Those needs may change 5 years from now, but right now, here's what I need. And
we learnt this, dentists. So when I was about 11 or 12, went to a dentist, and the guy was a sadist, and he pulled my wisdom teeth without any anaesthetic, and I passed out. And I woke up and I had semen on my face, and So he was a pedophile and a pervert. So, you know, when people talk about having dentist issues, dude, I got some serious fucking dentist issues, you know what I mean? So I needed to go in for some teeth work. And this is just in the I remember going to the dentist after I had recall of all this stuff for a couple of times. And man, I mean, I sweated for 3 days and I was probably nearly sick for the 3 days afterwards. I remember we went to this one and I was just starting to understand what self-advocacy was. Self-advocacy to me is I can tell you what I need, not because I'm broken, but because this is what I need to stay whole. And if you're not able to accommodate or help me with that on a human-to-human level, then I don't need your service or your goods. And that is your issue, not my issue. And there's a thing I talk about in Deal With It, turning our scars of shame into medals of honor. Like, I survived this, bro. Yeah. I'm okay with this. Like, this is who I am. And we went to this dentist place, and Mel was with me. And we walked in. This guy, he was an older guy and probably the nicest guy. And everyone's
he looked like somebody's grandpa. Like, he's just like...
Hello, my name's John King. I've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder because I was trafficked and sexually abused by my mother from the ages of 4 to 16. And when I met a dentist at the age of 11, he masturbated on my face as he pulled my teeth. I have a problem with fucking being here. So I need my wife to be in the room with me, and please don't give me anything that will knock me out, because if you do and I wake up, I'll punch you!
How'd that go?
Smile.
The guy handled it with so much grace. He was wonderful. He said, okay, John. He said, I'm sorry that happened to you. Of course your wife can stay in the room, and we're just going to clean your teeth today, so there shouldn't be any reason we need to knock you out.
What a superstar.
He was a rock star.
But what it showed us was that we could self-advocate with a sense of wholeness. And if that guy had had a problem, then we were at a stage where that was going to be his problem. It wasn't going to be our problem.
Yeah.
And I think that was a massive learning curve for us. And we have used that through just about everything else going forward. You know, from restaurants to the seminar we were just at, to, you know, I had a major hospital issue. We did the same thing there.
The airport.
Yeah, airports, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Wow. So we had talked about your perception of your childhood before you had the recall. What was the actual reality of your childhood?
Middle-aged home, well-educated family, upper middle class. We lived in nice homes, nice neighbourhoods. They were both educators. Probably one of my first memories was having oral sex with my mother to protect my sister from either doing the same act. Then there was a series of other things that happened, and then it was being taken to parties and being involved in sexual acts. My mother was, she was a bra-burning feminist at the time, and she had all these bra-burning feminist friends, and she'd often make me stand in front of her friends and ridicule me for being a man and a boy, and it was involved in these other things. And I was, you know, then there was a scout camp and the scout masters, and my father's girlfriends, and it was a clusterfuck, really.
Yeah.
So it just seemed to go on and on, you know. Was no safe space. It was safe space bullshit, man. I remember running away when I was 7 and 8, and you know, when you're 7 or 8, the farthest you run away is like front bushes at home.
Yeah.
And the neighbour finding me, this woman, and she asked me what was going on. I told her what my mother was doing to me, and she literally grabbed me by the collar, beat me around the head, and dragged me back, saying, you know, mothers don't do that to their sons. Yeah. And that was the last time I ever asked for help. Kind of fucked up, isn't it?
Yeah, that's incredibly fucked up. And I mean, the amount of times I've heard that story of, hey, stop making up bullshit.
Making up bullshit. If it was a girl, even back then, they would have believed the little girl. Yeah. Maybe not, maybe, but because it's a boy, and particularly because it's by a woman, Madonna complex, bro. It's like they won't deal with that shit, because we don't talk about men's and boys. Yet men and boys make over 50%. In some countries, as high as 85 and 95%, especially in any of the stands, the Pakistans, the Uzbekistans, any of those, where it's trafficking for labour and war as well. And no one wants to talk about it. And it's like because it's a political issue. It's not a human rights issue.
Yeah, there's a lack of objectivity and
Absolutely, it's all
morality.
bullshit, man.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time busting people's bubbles. We ask moms, oh, so you have kids, little boys or little girls? Both. Okay. Do you spend as much time talking to your little boy about what he should do if someone tries to, touch him on his private parts as you do your little girl, And
they'll say no. And they'll say, oh, I tell my son that if a man tries to touch him, it's fine. But if a woman does, it's okay because she's a woman.
Right.
Yeah, that went well for you, didn't it, mate?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So...
Educate your kids to be aware and keep them whole should be the aim of parents, as opposed to, running a political lobby group on the thing.
Yeah. The ideology is not the important thing. It's
No.
keeping the kids safe.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of what the time span for your abuse was?
4 to probably 16.
Wow.
And by the time I got to 16, I was just too big. I was probably 6 foot, probably 180 pounds.
Yeah.
Playing rugby. And I remember one night, he came at her with a pair of scissors and I stood in between and just took them off him and said, this shit fucking stops, man. And, my sister was safe by then. And I spent the next year in South Africa, I think, or the year after that in South Africa as an exchange student. And that was it. I was out by then.
Yeah. I think you had talked about this in your book, but there was always an ultimatum issued, right, of either you do this or your sister has to do the same thing.
Some of it was stated, like that first case where they were putting bread and honey in my mother's vagina and I had to eat it. It was either she did it or I did it, and that sort of set a pattern for the rest of the time. It was like there was just this sense that I knew that if I didn't do these acts or do these things, then my sister was going to be involved. My sister suffers a lot of guilt for that. I think she's been in therapy for 25 years now. Yeah. And she just still has a challenge accepting that what they did is what they did,
Yeah. I mean, even just bearing witness to that and realizing that that's who your parents were.
Stockholm Syndrome, man. It's like she survived it and she got away with it. And you hear a lot of guys in the military talk about the guilt they feel because they were the survivors. Yeah. And they say, man, I wish it was me. And probably my best mate, Meeks, is the same. Lost all these boys on one day. And 20 years later, still feels like shit. He lost his best mate. Lost all his friends. He's lost all his friends numerous times. But this big one, when he was with Blackwater, just devastated him. And I think that's what happens. I think that's what happened with my little sister. She just felt guilty. She'd never me. I never asked for anything. I was just, as a brother and as a man, as a young man, that's what I knew that was my role, was to protect her. Yeah. I think that's ingrained in men, is we are protectors. Yeah. And it certainly was the case then.
You had talked about getting into a lot of fights and that kind of stuff. What was your early childhood or teenage experience like actually out in the outside world?
When I fought, I couldn't stand bullies.
Yeah.
So if I saw anyone bullying another kid, then it was on. I remember the first fight I was at 12 was at high school, man. This guy was 18 and he picked on a kid because he was red-haired. So I just hit him in the nuts and just beat the shit out of him. That was the last fight I had in high school. Until there was some kids picking on an autistic kid at the bus stop. And I was school captain, man. I had the badge on, I had the coat on, the blazer, the whole thing, because we all wore uniforms. And they were picking on this little autistic kid. And I just, I took care of business, Then I turned around to this little autistic boy and put my hand on his shoulder and said, there, mate, I'll take care of you. And he kicked me in the nuts. This little fucking kid just kicked me in the nuts. And I'm doubled up and his sister goes, he doesn't like being touched. You fucking tell me now he doesn't like being fucking touched. I just saved his fucking life and I get kicked in the balls. Fuck this being fucking super protecting guy. But, it's the same. I fought a lot at college because we played rugby.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. You fought on the field, and then you went to the pub with the opposite team, all got drunk and fought some more. And then so I had about 20 doses of concussion growing up playing rugby. And then I came to America because when you've had 20 doses of concussion, you should take up boxing.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's no risky behaviour there whatsoever. So
that's the best place for people with brain damage.
Of course. Because they're all too stupid or fucked up and they just get about it. So I took up boxing. I did a martial art in Australia, and then I came over here and did kickboxing for a while.
Yeah.
So my fighting, most of it's been in the ring, and the occasional pub after rugby.
Yeah. How were you with people growing up? Did you find it easy to connect with people? Were you,
of course, man,
hesitant with people?
You have to be able to, they call it micro-slicing. And Left of Bane, there's a book written about it. The Marines, they developed a program where when they were going to Kabul and places like that, they found that the kids that were best and the most would survive on the streets were kids from the ghettos, lower middle class and lower poverty kids, because they could read the gang signs and they could instinctively identify in a split second that something wasn't wrong. So as a kid, if I was taken to a party, I would identify who was going to abuse me the least or hurt me the least. I knew I was going to be abused, but who was going to hurt me the least? And I'd micro-slice that. So if any law enforcement came to the door, they were the person of authority, so I would instantly engage with them and be gregarious. Because if they were the strongest person in the room, I was going to make sure they liked me the best. And so growing up, man, I was just a fun-loving, gregarious kid because I was just trying to fucking survive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where I find it goes either end of the spectrum. Either you become very charismatic and somebody that people can warm to very quickly, and that's your survival system. Mine was the complete opposite of that. I didn't want to be around people, kept everybody at arm's length, completely shut everybody out. And that was my way of keeping safe, was to isolate.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's one of the two. It seems to be the way of it. And now I'm at a stage where I just don't have to anymore. And we have a great opportunity. We run our business and our foundation from home. We work for ourselves. We're very blessed with what we're able to do and how we're able to help people from doing that. And so I don't have to. So when I go into a situation, it's because I want to. And I'm aware of the price it will take, and we measure it accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, different paths to the same outcome. I had this realization in the last probably 18 months of like, you're not in danger constantly. Like, everybody is not going to abuse you. Everybody is not a threat. You can let people in. You can be vulnerable. You can open up to them. And there are a lot of benefits to not shutting everybody out.
Yeah, there is. That's what she says. I just think they could all fuck off.
So, coming back to the day in 2008, what was your life like leading up to that time?
Oh, I would fly probably 150,000 air miles a year. I'd started a church just down the road from here. I had a corporate training company. I was a corporate coach for very select group of clientele, making a shit ton of money. Loved what I was doing in the church. I thought it was the last job I was ever going to do. I was making so much, and I just did it how I like to do it. Making a bunch of money, and I was just able to give it in the church, give it into the community, and it was a phenomenal season of life.
Yeah.
Leading up to there. And then in 2008 with Recall, I developed a chronic stutter. I couldn't even get in an elevator. I couldn't be with people. It led to the destruction of my marriage, the estrangement from my children. And I became a lock-in. I couldn't get out, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't be... I remember trying to sign a lease for an apartment. It was, what about the most embarrassing thing in your life? I couldn't even speak to this person. I could stutter too much. I had to have a friend fill out the fucking forms for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people who have a lot of trauma in their childhood, they create these artificial lives around themselves to convince themselves that they're happy or to kind of disconnect from the pain or pave over it, etc. But it sounds like your life was quite spiritually aligned and quite rewarding at the time.
Oh, mate, it was brilliant.
Yeah.
I had a little church, red brick church with a white steeple. I made sure to put a white steeple on it. And I loved it. I was so happy. I grew up doing mega church shit all my life and saw how shallow it was. And I just wanted to help a couple of hundred people collide with Christ and live authentic lives. And I was so bloody happy. And I was living the dream, man. I was just loved it. And then it got shitty. And that's okay. You know, it's like you always end up where you never thought you were and doing what you never thought you'd do. There is no plan A. There's only plan B, because that plan A is total bullshit.
Yeah.
And you scramble. And sometimes you get down like to plan F and think, fuck, how low does this go, you know? F for fucked. If I go G for God help me, you know? So, you know, but, you know, the reality of it, mate, is I love my life now. I like me. I never liked me before 08. I was doing my best to hide my disdain for myself.
Yeah.
But I've done the best I could with what I had. Now, I hope my kids see that one someday. I can't do anything about that. What was done to me, not by me. I take responsibility for the impact of sickness, and I see it as a sickness because, see, you can recover from an illness. I don't know if you can recover from disorder, and people want to call it a disorder. I don't know, I just never really have. I've seen it as something I'm in the process of recovering from.
Yeah.
So maybe they will one day recognise that Dad was trying to do the best with what he... Because you hurt a lot of people on the way.
Of course.
And you never want to, but they want to carry on about how tough it was for them. And, you know, I get it, but they can also fuck off because it's... I don't give a shit how tough it was for them. It was nothing like how tough it was for me.
I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot in this, that you do end up hurting people along the way. Yeah. And it's inadvertent because you don't have that understanding of what happened to you.
Yeah.
And you don't mean to do it, but it is just the fallout from...
It's a byproduct of an illness. Look, dude, if I had cancer, everyone would be crowding around, wishing me well, wishing my family well, giving them support. Because it's a mental illness, like this fucking guy's about to go postal. Did you hear he had PTSD? Did you hear he was abused as a kid and was in movies? He's got to be a fucking pervert. It's like, fuck you, man. It's like there's no support.
Anytime, though, even if it is cancer, anytime you have a life implosion, something that you totally did not plan for, there are people that get hurt along the way.
Yeah.
Like if I got diagnosed with cancer and my body was betraying me, that's what I would feel like. I probably would go freaking crazy. And I'd shut out all my friends, and some of them would get hurt. And so I think anytime life doesn't go the way that we're planning for it to go, I think, like you said, there's fallout. And it just is what it is, and we do the best we can.
But if that happened to you, I'd call bullshit on it with you and say, fuck off. Your friends will fucking come around. I'd ring all your friends and make sure they fucking show up. And if they didn't turn up at least once a month, I would shame the shit out of them and fucking manipulate so you had friends and you were getting out and doing shit like that, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
Mental illness is a sort of beast of its own. People don't want to talk about it. They don't understand it, so they're afraid of it.
My favourite T-shirt is PTSD does not equal postal, because and I get more comments off that shirt than anybody. I've got a bright red flag one, you know, because just because I have PTSD does not it actually makes me more aware of my behaviour, because I'm on edge all the time about my reactions because I don't want to hurt those that I love. Now, in this stage of my recovery, I am. I understand why my first marriage broke down, you know, and you know, I'm not taking all the blame for it because these things go both ways.
Of course,
she could have, should have, whatever, a whole lot to help me, and just refused to. But I understand what I did, and I understand how difficult it was, and I understand what it's like when you go from John 1.0 to John 2.0. I get that. But, you know, going forward, you know, you have to come to terms with who you are. You have to come to terms with the impact of this thing. You have to let people in, and you have to do what you do to survive. You know,
it goes back to that thing again of I'm fine, and you know, I think a lot of that comes from people's association with this stuff. People have that correlation between PTSD, postal, and people don't want to be lumped into that bucket, but there is a selection bias there that people are not acknowledging. I think it's gotten better in the last couple of years as people have become more trauma informed, but people still don't want to be associated with the negative or dark sides of being affected by something like this.
And that's mental illness. They don't want to. There are the extremes in it, but dude, there are the extremes in anything, any illness, any whatever. And there are the extremes in mental illness. But most people who have the mental illness of post-traumatic stress disorder are trying their best not to impact those around them, and are more aware and self-aware of the impact of their behaviour on others, and probably do the most to mitigate that. They withdraw, they're aware, they walk away. If they blow up, they just back off the thing and they'll take shit for it. You know, they're very, you know, fuck, man.
And then, unfortunately, suicide is also another part of that.
Absolutely.
They would rather take themselves out of the game than hurt somebody.
Suicide for me, I remember doing a SWOT analysis on suicide, and arriving to the conclusion that it was actually, and I was encouraged by the previous administration to do that. You know, and told very clearly that I would never recover and never get better, and therefore it was best for me to just, you know, have a think about it. That was my takeaway from it. And I remember very coldly looking at it, going, you know what, maybe that's the case. You know, I got a couple of phone calls from Melissa at the time. She was on my staff and just called me, and I was sitting with a barrel and a bottle, and, you know, just running the numbers. The guys that commit suicide, mate, my military mates who know people, and the guys I've known who have committed suicide, they did it in a very non-emotional state. They just ran the numbers and said, I don't want to hurt anyone anymore. I can't seem to get my handle around this, so I'm just going to fuck off. You know, and that makes it harder. See, if I can blame someone for being over emotional and mental, as opposed to they sat down and coldly calculated their exit from this world because they actually felt that bad about themselves and that bad about how they'd impacted and hurt those around them. Yeah. You know, that's someone who's acutely self-aware.
Absolutely.
And you have to deal with that sort of person differently than just looking for some crazy prick who's going to off himself. Because that guy or girl who's sitting there running the numbers on this shit, they're very cold, they're very together, they're very presenting. Because when they want to go with everything calm around them. And that calmness you can't pick that shit, man. That's hard to pick.
Absolutely. Going back to your experience in the wake of your recall, how did the next 1, 2, 3 years play out for you?
It was 7 years and it was just totally fucked. It was it was just a complete, so 7 years to, what does that take me up to, 12? I got divorced
15.
in 15, it takes me up to 15. I got divorced in 2015. I would walk around every day with daymares, like I'd see orgies. I'd be sitting here talking to you, and I would see the abuse play out on the screen behind, the films, the movies, being sexually abused, constant daymares. I didn't sleep more than 90 minutes in a stretch. I'd set my alarms at 3 o'clock to get up because at 3:30, 4 o'clock the nightmares would get really bad. Yeah. And then I'd go to the gym. I'd have to nap in the afternoons. I was running a church and speaking and couldn't get on planes anymore, so that went away. My inability to be able to be and connect with people started to go away, so the church started to shut down. When people found out that I was sick, they all just fucked right off, you know. Whatever, man. People are fickle. And my marriage started to implode, you know, and I became difficult I didn't even like being with myself, let alone having anyone else. And I couldn't. And I was having to wrestle this shit. There was no books. There was no therapy. No one wanted to talk to me because I was a man who was abused by women. That shit just didn't happen. So, I told you before, I rang up a church support group and asked for some help. And they said, well, you're just one of those perverts who want to sit around and chat up women and talk to them about, listen to their sexual incidents, and told this grey-haired poor little secretary to go fuck herself. It wasn't my finest day. But
that seems warranted.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was going to say fuck her, but it wasn't. She was just depicting the times.
Yeah, she's uninformed. Yeah.
No, there was nothing out there. This is 15, nearly 20 years ago, man.
Yeah, of course.
No one was having this conversation. And I started to write poetry. I started to try and put my handles around it. But, I was a freak. A man who'd been sexually abused by his mother makes you a fucking freak. You can sit around and have a conversation at dinner, and some lady will say, look, I was sexually abused, and they go, oh, well, poor you. And I get it. They can talk the conversation. You sit up at a dinner and go, yeah, hey, I got anally fucked with my toy soldier because I didn't pack it away when I was a kid. And everyone goes, well, that's great. Yeah, we got to go.
Yeah.
The babysitter. It's it's not a dinner conversation. And so none of that was happening. So there's no support, no nothing. So I'm sitting in my garden shed trying to work this shit out. And I was just fucked. I was trying to work this thing out 18 hours a day, reading every book. I read probably 200 books on this stuff. The first case of PTSD was recorded in the French Revolution by a doctor then. And the next one I found was in the Civil War. I read everything in the military on it. Read everything in the female stuff, but then I hated that shit because all men were bastards, according to them. It's like, fuck that. So, then I tried to find people. I couldn't find anyone. I ended up finding, a therapist in South Dakota who I'd talk to. And I just needed to make my own way. So if you think of that, and you think of the fact that time span took now 4 or 5 years for me to start to get my head around things, then relationally, in my marriage at the time and in my family, my kids it was tough for my children.
Of course.
Daddy just cried all the time. Daddy was angry all the time. Daddy was yelling all the time. Mummy was yelling at Dad. Mum was drunk for 4 or 5 years. And, so...
Yeah, and again, there's that question, is it okay to not be okay? Because you have this lifestyle that you've created as a provider, as protector, as husband, father, friend, etc. What do you do when you need that time out to work on yourself?
Yeah, the reality is it's not okay to be not okay.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of it. And makes a great title for a book, but fuck that. It's just not true. It's just not true. You can't take off. You got to get up and provide every day. You got to drag yourself to work. And the emotional and mental energy of providing for your family is always at the cost of the person who's sick. Doesn't matter if you've got cancer or broken legs or you're quadriplegic. You got to get out the fucking door. Bit hard if you're a quadriplegic. I meant paraplegic, but we've had a whiskey. So you get out the door and you do that shit, and you got to get it done. You can't sit around and feel sorry for yourself.
I think that's why most of the folks that we help, if there is a husband and wife, we try to help both folks, because life still has to happen every day, and if the husband's struggling with PTSD or the wife is, either one. We have had one case where both were
and that was a cluster
struggling. So we
told them they could only take turns. Like 1 week it was someone's person, the next week the other. You can't do this shit together because
no double meltdowns. Somebody's got to be strong in every situation. But we do try to help them with goal setting, small goals, for putting tools in the toolbox and how to cope with that, because life still does go on.
Yeah.
Kids are going to grow up, and you got to parent them, and jobs have to be had, stuff has to be paid for. So we try to help people, even in the midst of messiness, manage their recovery process.
Yeah. And even to go back to something that you said a little while ago, the John 1.0 and John 2.0, how do you manage all of that stuff as you're in this transitional phase? Because everything that was true or that you knew before that someone's flipped the table on all that, right? And it's how do you show up how do you experience the world now that everything is different? And it is very difficult for the person going through it, but then it's also very difficult for the person on the other side.
On the other side to get it. It's true. You've got to redefine normal very quickly.
Yeah.
On what is acceptable. And you have to embrace, in my case, John 2.0 very quickly. Because everything changed. I went from left brain, goal-driven to wanting to write poetry and smoke cigars, you know.
Yeah. And there's also the question of, do I even like John 2.0? This is not the John I met.
And that was the thing, like John 1.0 had these skills, and he was trying to impose it on John 2.0. John 2.0 is I don't fucking like that shit anymore, bro. I like to do this shit. And this guy's saying, dude, what are you doing that shit for? We're hugging trees and shit and crying out poetry. Why? We don't write poetry. We fucking love poetry. Fuck off. We don't smoke cigars. We fucking love cigars. So this whole shit's going. And at one point you got to go, John 1.0 is dead.
Yeah.
He's just, and I thank him for his time. And he got me to here. But I have to learn to love this guy. And these disabilities are different abilities. And what are this guy's skills? Okay, but remember this. So here I am now at 45, totally new, trying to learn a new set of skills because some of this stuff I couldn't do or I had to relearn. I'm having to learn new skills, find new careers, find a new way to communicate in the world. I'm 45 and I'm a toddler.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a mind trip. And then to everybody else around you, you're a different person.
The people who knew you before,
Some
of them go so far as to say, you made this all up. You've made this up.
Yeah.
You know,
that was my wife at the time.
There's no possible way that this could have happened to you. Even business associates and folks who had come to the church, they were like, this guy just made this all up. He just wanted to divorce his wife, you know, or whatever. And so I think there is... you do have to deal with the fallout of now you woke up one day and you are a totally different person. And
like take a military guy. So, you know, they get married on the church steps and she's got a pretty yellow summer dress and she sees him off and gives him a kiss and he goes away as a 22, 23-year-old and does some shit. And then he comes home and where's the hell is that guy? Now he does that on 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 30 tours.
Yeah.
Who the fuck is that guy?
And also, who understands that guy's experience?
No one does but that guy.
Or the people on his team. But, I mean, they're not there when he comes home.
And the police, they go into it. Those guys are on 24/7 high alert. They get married in their 20s. He goes to work every day. Everyone fucking hates him. Every day. And she's in a little bit of a bubble in the world that he's trying to provide. And he wants her to have that bubble. He wants those kids to have that bubble. But he's not in that bubble. He spends most of his time out here and comes home and visits the bubble.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, is you go overseas, you're deployed, you come back in the bubble. And you're fighting and you're giving your blood for the bubble to exist. But the bubble exists external to you.
Yeah.
And here I was, in my case, I was in my backyard trying to solve it. And I would literally walk up the 2 acres to my house. And that was my bubble. I was desperately trying to save my bubble, but I couldn't save my bubble because my bubble was not a place that I could relate to.
You're trying to live a double life.
You are living a double. And my kids would want to stay at their friend's place, and I'd just cry because I knew they were going to get raped and killed. My wife at the time would want to go to Walmart, and I'd follow her up there and sit in the car because I was just petrified for her. But that was all interpreted or misinterpreted as me being a control freak instead of me just not coping with anything, not wanting to lose those that I loved the most.
Yeah.
And there was no language around this at the time, 10, 15 years ago. There was no one having these conversations that I need to be able to get you on the phone. Why? Because you're a control freak and I need me time. No, because I don't want to lose my shit. And if I lose my shit, I'm going to say stuff I regret. And I'm going to get so amped up, I'm going to fucking turn up. And I'm going to be so fucking on. And I just need to be able to call you and make sure that you're okay and you're safe.
Yeah.
And, you can't, I didn't even know how to have those conversations when I started this thing.
I mean, not a lot of people understand how affected you become from this stuff, for sure.
Yeah. And not a lot of people, and I remember we were talking to some military people at the time. And some mates we had at the time, and Mel said, just leave your phone on. But you know, he's not trying to control you. And he burst into tears. He said, I just want to know you're safe. She goes, well, what do you mean? I'm just going to the store. Well, can you just text me that you're okay? She goes, that's all you want? Yeah, that's all I want. I just want to know that you're safe. Because if you're not for 45 minutes, by the time you get home, I'm going to be so fucking amped up. And it was like, you know, Mel and I had to work all this out for ourselves. And I mean, man, we threw some shit around. Like we threw dishcloth. We are the best dishcloth throwers at each other. Fuck, man, we can throw dishcloths at each other like no one else.
We did. We had to, and we don't get it perfect all the time, but what we are pretty far down the road at is communicating what our needs are. You know,
but she's exceptional in helping me. Like, she'll go out and she'll text me where she's going, what she's doing, she's coming home. And I think of it, how laborious it would be to have to do that every time you fucking leave. I mean, it's fucked up that she feels that she's got to do that. But she does it because she loves me. And she just doesn't want me to worry.
Yeah.
And I think that is just wonderful.
If I had a husband who was in a wheelchair, it would be no sweat for me to get the wheelchair and put it on the thing on the back of the car. Like it's no different. It's just what needs to happen, you know, for us to function and be happy and for everybody to be relaxed. It's no strain. You just get used to.
It's no strain because she's made it no strain for her, and it's no strain for us. That's just how we need. So if you've got to put a wheelchair on the back of the car, it takes a little more time to do that. But you do that because you love them.
So as you started to get some time with this recall, what things started to work for your healing?
Well, I the biggest thing was I redefined normal for myself, and I redefined how I looked at normal for me. If I needed a nap in the afternoon at 3 p.m. because I got up at 3 a.m. to avoid the nightmares, then that was okay. That was my new normal, and I just had to organise my schedule accordingly. The other thing, I had to stop looking for a miracle, you know. God was my heavenly father, not my fairy godmother. He wasn't going to turn up and just tap me with a wand. You don't get, you know, delivered from a mental illness. You have to come to terms with it and manage it. And I realised that I had to get up every day and I had to put a new tool in my toolbox. And my toolbox was this mental thing I developed when I'd start to read these things. Even if I read, you know, a 450-page tome, if I could walk away with one more thing, that'd be one thing I'd put in my mental toolbox that I could pull out at different times. And when I realised that this was going to take me a long time, this was going to be a lifelong endeavour, that I would never be cured from it, but I would have to learn to manage this thing. And once I accepted that this was mine, it's a little bit like a person coming to terms with the fact that they will always, their leg is going to never be there again. They'll never have a left leg. They're always going to have to use a prosthetic. You've got to come to terms with that shit, man. And I had to do the same thing mentally. And once I did, and I came to peace with that, and then a series of like redefining normal, accumulating the tools I need, being prepared to hunt those down and find those, then I think I started fairly squarely down the path to recovery. Yeah. You know, there was years leading up to it. You got to do that time of waiting for the miracle cure and trying all the miracle cure before you get to the realization of, oh shit, this is who I am. Can I like this person?
Right.
Because I'm going to have to live with them for the rest of... That was a big acceptance of John 2.0. And can he operate in this world? He has to operate in this world. Therefore, he's got to accumulate the tools to operate in this world. And that's going to be renegotiating contracts relationally with everybody around you. Because dad can do these things, dad can't do those things anymore. As a husband, I can do these things, I can't do those things anymore. And you've got to negotiate all of those relationships around.
Yeah. Around what time into this process, like year what, did you start to turn this corner?
I think probably year four or five. But my marriage at that point was so broken. There was so much resentment because I got ill.
Yeah.
It was 2 very dark years, and it was a very hostile home environment. And I was never going to get well in that environment. And because I just didn't have the support to do it. My kids were too young, and I just was so concerned about the damage that was happening to them because we were constantly fighting. She moved out of the bedroom, and she didn't want anything to do with me. And so it was really dysfunctional. I didn't want my kids growing up thinking that was normal.
Right.
So now you have not only the mental illness and the start of the recovery process to deal with, but now you overlay on that a divorce, which makes even the sanest, most stable person go crazy. And so then that...
Yeah, so say from 2004 to 2008 to 2012, 4 years there, you're in this process of understanding what happened to you, which is about what it is, and you start to ask some questions. So now I'm say at 2012, I know I start to identify the things I've got to do to get better, and I'm trying to change, but I'm not allowed to change. I'm not allowed to be seen different. I'm not allowed to be seen. I'm not allowed to be given. Even every time I try and move forward, you'll never change. You'll never make me happy. You'll never be a good father. You'll never be loved. You're hopeless and useless. You're a retard because you stutter. Everything's dragged back over and over again. It's like, you know, why would God allow me to marry someone like you? You're a terrible... And at some point I said, well, fuck you, okay? If I'm terrible for you. I'd rather do this on my own and try not to kill myself and try and be a good dad. And so that's what happened. It's like I've got to go it on my own. I've got to get out there and try and do this thing and make it happen, because I was never going to get well.
Did you have a community around you at that time that you could talk to about this stuff?
No, I was in a church. I ran a church, and they fucked off as soon as I got sick. Just about everybody except for probably 2 couples, 2 friends. Mel's close friend Barb and her husband Al, and another friend Ron and Alicia.
Pastor in Texas.
First
of all, getting a divorce, that's bad enough.
You're better off killing your wife in Texas instead of getting divorced, because then you'd go to jail for like 5 years and come out and have a ministry.
Right.
It's fucked up, bro.
So people just run for the hills. They don't want any part of that.
Yeah. And people, because it's a mental illness and it's PTSD, and we all know people with PTSD just run around randomly killing each other. Right. You know, ask the government. So there was nothing. There was no real support group.
Yeah.
I had to go out of Texas to get therapy, to find someone who'd treat me. And
can you talk about that experience, your therapy experience? And I know you described it in the book, but I found it very interesting how you approached it.
Why? What did you find interesting about it?
The thing that I love about you is you are all in all the time. And instead of doing like 10 years of therapy, you decided you wanted the 30-day plan.
It was 3 weeks, yeah. So I go and see Mona, mate. Mona lived in South Dakota, and she was introduced to me by a friend who's his mother-in-law. And Mona had been sexually abused, and she'd been a therapist for 35 years. So I didn't want to see anyone in Texas, because as soon as people find out in Texas you're a pastor, and you know they want to try and cast out the mental illness demons from me, it's like, fuck that, man. Like, that's not going to help me. You know, I'd come to that point of realization. So I went and saw Mona, and I remember the day. It was a snowy day, mate. It was all fucking South Dakota, snowy, covered in shit. And I was back, and I'm pretty sure that Mona was Satan. Satan was going to come out, and Satan was going to eat my soul, and this fucking bitch was going to get me. I'm going to fuck you, I'm not talking to you about... Understand, I booked the appointment and I flew out. Fuck you, I'm never going to fucking tell you fucking
She hasn't done anything at this point.
And I've done nothing. I threw this car in a drive to rip off, and it was in reverse, and I backed into this snowbank. At the same time, this little old grey-haired lady comes... Hi, John.
She's about like 4'10".
4 foot, nothing. Yeah. Knocks on the fucking door, and she's got glasses, she's got grandma garb, the grandma scarf, grandma puffy coat. Hi, you, John? Yeah, you're going into reverse. Oh, many people do that when they come to see me. Why don't you come? Fuck you, Satan! You know. And so I go in and see Mona, and Mona had this cup of M&Ms, And she said, "Do you want an M&M?" So I took a cup of M&M. I was sitting there, M&M, you know.
Now he's nervous eating.
Nervousness in there, and Mona. And I'm sitting there, and Mona goes, "You know, you have 45 minutes introductory appointment, and why don't you tell me about your childhood?" I'm telling you, Mona. And I remember sitting on mine saying, "I'm going to bullshit this bitch, and I'm fucking out of here."
Right.
One, or I can tell her the truth. Fuck telling her the truth. Who the fuck is Mona? You know, I'm sitting there and go, "All right." I remember saying, "I'll give this one chance." One chance. So I said, at the age of 4, the first memory I ever had was my father put honey and bread in my mother's vagina and I had to eat it. And then it started. And I just told her. So we're 45 minutes into it and Mona calls the secretary and said, "Would you mind just moving my next appointment?" Another 40 minutes. "Would you mind cancelling the rest of my afternoon?" And at the end of it, Mona just said, she burst into tears and said, "John, that's the worst story I've ever heard. And I can't possibly help you." And I looked at her, and I'm in my head, I'm thinking, "Are you fucking kidding me right now,
Right.
bitch? You fucking kidding me? I just told you my shit." And I looked at her, and I said very calmly, and I was in a good place by that point. I said, "Thank you, Mona, for that. And I want to tell you this, and I'm not being manipulative, but I told you this story once. I'm never telling another therapist this story." I said, "I'm not telling another soul my story. So I don't need you to cure me, because you can't. That's my responsibility. But what I need you to do is give me tools for my toolbox." And she came back to me the next day and we talked. And she said, "Look, I've talked to my therapist and my oversight, and we've decided that the best thing we can do is you can come back once a week for the next 6 months, and we believe we can help you." And I said, "Oh, that won't do, Mona. I'm here for a week. I need to see you 2 to 3 times every day, every week, every day of the week." And she goes, "You'll die." She said, you don't know me."
Yeah, that's intense.
"Yeah, it is." I said, "I'm doing 2 a days." She goes, "Okay." So we negotiated this whole thing. I said, "You just need to trust me, man. I know what I can tolerate." And I said, "I'm running at this thing because I run at everything. And I need to solve this thing. I need to solve this thing or I'll be dead. And I've decided I'm going to solve this thing now, so I'm just going to fucking solve this now." And Mona was great, man. She said, yeah, she took a gamble on me. It was fucking intense, man. I mean, I was up there training for a bodybuilding competition. So I'd get up every morning, I'd go down to the restaurant in the hotel, have a dozen scrambled eggs, go to the gym, do my cardio, then I'd go see Mona, and then I'd have to come back for more workout or more cardio, do my cardio and workout, come back for cardio. It was South Dakota, I had a big beard. It was full of snot because I'd cried all session. So it was frozen hard snot beard. And I'm sitting in there, fucking crying, and they were calling the cops in. I'd have an intervention, all that sort of shit, but I did it. I was bright orange at the time too because I was training, so I was a fucking orange snot beard, 230-pound bodybuilder, howling at the top of his voice on the treadmill. So,
That's not a situation a lot of people want to address. Is to
no.
keep that at
and
arm's length.
the treadmills face the window, so all these people. Fucking guy, fucking beanie down over his head, fucking solid snot green beard. Wasn't a pretty sight, mate.
Was that therapy a specific modality? And was that the only one you tried? And how do you feel like that helped in your progress?
It was EMDR.
Okay.
And I found it very helpful. But EMDR is only helpful for certain sorts of persons, people.
Right.
And other people have tried, neuro-linguistic programming and
Cognitive behavioral.
cognitive behavior shit and the recall stuff and the...
I mean, you're kind of ahead of the curve doing EMDR in
I was.
like early 2010s.
Yeah, it was really... Yeah, it would have been about 2010. 2010,
No, it
2011.
was a little later. It was 2014, I think, or
Something like that.
2013.
Yeah, but it wasn't a popular thing.
There was not many people doing it.
But so it was very, very... And I still use it today. I used it last week at this other thing. I found what it does is it puts me into a place of alpha brainwaves. So I'm able to detach from the emotional state, but be very cognitive of what's happening around me and project positive images in that space. And so that's been a very useful meditative skill. And so it was EMDR was very helpful. And it was the only one, like I found it at work and it was like everyone's try this and try. No, I got this thing, man. I got my tool.
Yeah.
I don't need to keep. And therapy for me, and I told her very clearly, I said, I don't need you to save me. I need you to equip me. And that's the difference. I was going to see a therapist for a limited period of time because logically to me, she would have to give me some tools and then I'm done, because I'm not developing a codependent relationship. If I need a different sort of therapist with a different set of tools, that's fine. But I'm not fucking... why? If I can't be good to go after 90 days of seeing someone, they haven't given me their best. And if they've given me their best, then I should be pretty much sucking them dry, getting everything I can, and then I need to find the next thing, the next book, the next person. But that's just who I am. I've got to constantly be pursuing wholeness, because it's my responsibility to get well. It's not my therapist's responsibility to get me well. It's my responsibility to get the tools I need to get whole. And no one can tell me if I'm getting stuff from them or if I'm not. And then you've got to be prepared to do the work between the sessions. Right. Now, for me, man, I'm double timing. I'm doing 2 days. I'm getting up early, doing my shit, going to the gym, then I'm going back. I'm doing 3 or 4 hours of homework on the mill, get treadmill again, another 3 or 4 hours, get up again, go again, push, and I'm cramming it in. As opposed to this, just go around and do nothing for the next week or so and blah, blah, blah. Fuck that.
That is something that really stood out in the book, Deal With It, was how capable you are of systematizing things. And there was...
Really? That's interesting.
There was a very obvious intentionality to how you approached your healing. You were like, all right, I took this from this book. I got this from this therapist. I got this from my faith, et cetera, and how you were able to incorporate it all into one holistic approach to healing was very intriguing, but also very impressive, I found.
Oh, that's good. I'm impressive.
You are impressive. When I first met John, I just read the book Uncommon Genius, and it talks about how all these folks who've won this particular prize and they're considered geniuses, what was the special thing about them so after fresh reading that, I meet John and I'm like, you are a genius and here's your thing. He's amazing at taking a volume of information and reading lots of different seemingly unrelated books and then taking that and making that information cohesive and applicable to his situation. I'm like, you are the best person I've ever met at assimilating a wide variety of information and using it for, whatever topic he seems to be studying at the time, which for about 10 years there he studied recovery. And I think that is his ability to focus and his attention to detail is really...
My first thing was I drew a Venn diagram. So I had all these traits. My first diagnosis was a borderline personality disorder. But Mona was very good with me that she said, you don't want that because people die from that and they never recover. Because all it is the bits and pieces that are left over.
Right.
And psychologists can't work out what to do. So it looks like post-traumatic stress disorder. So I drew myself a Venn diagram, anxiety, depression, paranoia, blah, 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 blah. And I overlaid it. Then I identified the 20% of things that were going to give me the 80% of the result. And so all I did was then concentrate on those 20% of things. And I think if I remember is right, it was like paranoia, anxiety, risky behavior.
Depression was
a big one.
Yeah.
So I just worked on those 4 or 5 things. And that changed my life 80%. And now I've been able to flip it. And I spend probably the majority of the time now concentrating on the 20%, which really most people will never see. It's just a matter of a quality of life.
Yeah. I'm curious, what forms did your risky behavior take?
Driving a motorbike in monsoon rain at 150 miles an hour on a freeway in nothing but singlets and a pair of shorts. Going sailing after I hadn't been sailing for 20 years and not in a calm breeze and not by myself, but with my then girlfriend at 35 knots in a catamaran that I brought the day before and nearly drowning her and myself. I don't know. I did everything. It was everything. It was
Mountain biking?
yeah. Okay, so I decided to take up mountain biking and
Wanted to start mountain biking,
So
but
I
you don't
bought
start like with the easy trails.
you start with the Black Diamond.
Of course,
trails.
yeah, because you got to crank it all the way up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I'm fucking in.
And if you're not in 100% on that Black Diamond trail,
fuck you, fucking see you at the bottom, bitch. I'm going. And then you meet
I'm
some.
like walking back to the car.
Then
with
you
my
meet some
bike.
20-year-old kid who's going to race to the top and said, "Ha ha, look at the old man." It's like, all right, okay. So here I am, mate, in fucking bike shoes, beating this kid who's 30 years younger than me to the top of the hill, so I could look down and go, "Yeah, fuck off."
Of course.
Because that's really fucking sensible. And mind you, I ripped up everything and everything.
But it makes sense to you at the time, right?
I know. No, what made sense to me is I'm going to fucking kill you, cunt.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's the part that makes sense.
The
Yeah.
only thing is,
Going sailing made sense at the time. Like
Right.
this, it's gonna be great, babe. Don't worry. I know
140
you.
miles an hour, man.
Like
going
you've never been sailing before. It's fine.
so fast that you're starting to get the wobbles in the back as you change lane. Blearing, I cannot see 2 feet in front of me, and that's when I knew I had a problem. I thought, oh fuck, And then the sailing thing too was like, the sailing thing was literally, I nearly killed the only person who's ever really loved me. Dude, you got some fucking issues.
Right.
I gave the boat away. Like that following week, I just gave it away to someone. I just needed to. Everything was risky. And when I look back from that point, from the sailing boat backward, everything I'd ever done had been risky. Like every sport I'd ever tried, every activity, my so-called social hobbies. I took up flying aeroplanes, I'm a single-engine pilot. And shit, dude, some of the stuff I did, flying an aeroplane, like into an ice storm, just to see if my training worked.
Yeah.
Like, dude, you don't do that. You understand? Like,
absolutely. And that is something that not a lot of people understand. Like, people are just like, oh, I took up wingsuiting. It's like, there's probably something in the background.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I so want to do that. Like, but she won't let me. Like, seriously, like, I go to Krav Maga, I look like one of those special needs kids. I got a fucking helmet, I got a mouth guard, I got a collar on. I was like, she rolls me up in bubble wrap before she shoots me out the door to go fight. But I'd so love to do wingsuiting.
Yeah.
He comes home from Krav class having broken his nose and doesn't even realize it. I'm like, why are your eyes black? What happened? And he's like, oh. And he looks in the mirror and he's like, oh. And he like straightens his nose out. I guess I broke my nose.
But I look back at a history of risky behavior.
Of course, yeah.
The drinking,
Rugby. Can we just say rugby?
Fighting, the combat sports.
All of it.
All of it, yeah.
All of it was risky behavior. Abseiling, angel falling, parachuting. And you're never just parachuting sober. You had to parachute drunk or hungover. It's just everything. Everything has been risky I don't know. But by the grace of God, man, I'm still alive. I look at all this shit I did. And, and it's part of, once you realize it's risky behavior and you identify it, even sexual relationships, anyway, the wife's here, so we won't go into that too much. But,
I understand and
the
can relate.
blanket, let's just say promiscuity. Maybe.
well, just also the novelty or excitement or just danger
of just shagging strange or doing whatever, and you'd put yourself out there and just do it because it meant nothing at the time. Like, doesn't matter what it was, it means nothing. It was just that, can I get away? Can I survive this?
Yeah.
Emotionally, relationally, physically, can I survive this thing? And I'm going to want to find the thing. So if it's a marital relationship, it's pornography, or it's fucking some stranger doing something. If it's physically, can I ride down this freeway like this, and can I pick a fight in a bar in a strange town where no one knows me and get away with it? So you've got whatever that is, because I want to prove my whatever. So you've got all that stuff, that dichotomy going on. And then when you realize that this is a direct result of this mental illness I've got, you go, oh, so if I cater to this, that means I haven't resolved that.
Right.
And that was a major.
And risky behavior doesn't even have to include like substance abuse or, going sailing and crazy.
It can be spending money.
Money,
yeah.
like I was
eating,
going to say,
overeating, yeah.
Financial, things or whatever. So.
And I look at my upbringing, my home. Peter was very bad with money. He'd make a lot of money.
That's your dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd make a lot of money, spend a lot of money. constantly putting the family under incredible stress. And it was all risky behaviour because of his childhood.
It's amazing that you've got perspective on that. A lot of people never get that distance
I still have risky behaviour, and I don't deny it, I limit it. So I go to Krav Maga.
We have a language, a vocabulary for it. You know, he will say, I'm
feeling risky.
I'm feeling a little risky today, and so we will do our best to...
I mitigate it. So I choose a sport that I like that doesn't have a lot of sparring, and I wear a mouth guard and headgear and take my gloves. Or if I find myself going somewhere and spending money, all of a sudden it's $20 on something instead of $2,000 on something.
Right.
So I'm aware of it. And eating, okay, so instead of a whole chocolate cake, it'll be like a Butterfinger.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of it, and so it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this now? Or I come home and have a whiskey or something.
Do you find there's any set of circumstances or factors that generally leads to that?
Anything that's related to stress, loneliness, fear, new things.
I was going to say, if we have something new coming up, we...
Yeah. But I've learnt, and I think self-awareness is very key for recovery. I'm aware of what these feelings are, the heightened rate, the inability to sleep, the constant vigilance that happens for 2 or 3 days before a new thing. And then that normally translates into just being tense and edgy about something. Then it's like, okay, what's coming up? Oh, we've got the podcast coming up. We've got this event we've got coming up. We've got this thing. So, okay. So therefore, if I'm like that, therefore it's going to lead into some risky behaviour. Therefore, I need to be vigilant of what I'm looking at on the computer. Because porn's a big manifestation for people with risky behaviour.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely. Yeah.
And a lot of the guys in the military, they all go over with, they come home all porn addicts because they just spend a whole bunch of time over there viewing that shit that just destroys their relationship when they get home. And once you become aware of that, and you become aware that this risky behaviour is because of post-traumatic stress, then you understand that part of treating your post-traumatic stress is you've got to address this risky behaviour, be it whatever form it takes.
A lot of it for us is scheduling. If we know we have something that's going to cause John to be a little edgy a few days before, we'll put a lot of buffers in his schedule so he has time to sit outside and have a cigar and slow down. Slowing down internally for him is really important in addressing that sort of risky feeling.
So we did it today. We knew we had tonight, so I took this morning off. And tomorrow morning I've got to work on this new book, so I've got 3 hours in there, which will get me in a really positive space because it's creative and different. And so then we've got something on the afternoon tomorrow that's going to be non-technical and will be enjoyable, a business thing, but will get my head out of the space. And I've managed to shorten the time down from 3 to 7 days of the wash from something like this down to around 12 to 18 hours.
Yeah.
But the fact that we calculate that now and that we're aware of it and we know what that time is, but tomorrow morning I'll go to the gym. We'll get up at 5:45. I'll go to the gym at 7:15, and I'll make sure that I don't push myself beyond 80%. Because I'm going to be emotionally on edge, and if I push myself, I want to prove myself to myself, therefore it's going to be risky behaviour. And then when I fight tomorrow night...
And an injury is what that means.
And then when I fight tomorrow night, I'm going to have to make sure I've got my headgear on, and I only push myself to 80%. Now, sometimes other people might see that as me being a pussy. Me, it means that I'm not going to get injured and be out for 6 weeks.
It's what works for you.
It all works. Yeah. And I've got to be prepared to do that and balance that.
But it also kind of, I see a correlation there between you racing that kid to the top of the mountain and then also you regulating. Like, if you look at that objectively, that kid probably would not be thinking about you the next day.
Never.
Even though you have ruined your body for probably the next 3 years.
And here I am 5 years later still talking about the fucking little prick.
And then the other side of that is, okay, say you go 60%, 40% in sparring. Somebody might think, oh, that guy's pussy's taking a night off.
Too old, all that shit.
But that's why does that matter to you, right? It's
Doesn't
like that's the thing that is the best for you. You are taking care of yourself. Like that's self-care for you. And I don't think that's something that a lot of people have a good grasp on, is like how to, again, to borrow your guys' term, advocate for yourself.
Yeah, and that becomes a language, an internal. And what's really nice is Melissa's role in that is because she will know tomorrow morning when I get up and we're getting out, she'll be able to sense that I'm a little on edge, and she will stop me before I go, and she will say, I need you to take care of yourself. And for us, that's a language. And if I don't get it, if I'm just all fucking around with a coffee, I got to go, woman, get my man shit on.
She'll go, autopilot.
Yeah. And she'll go, no, I need you to stay safe. Do you understand? And she will talk it through. We had a very emotional night. You need to make sure you're safe. And it's the same at Krav now, because I have the last 3 weeks I've come home with, it's been very emotional. And I've come home with massive injuries. I've come home with big injuries. And she's starting to go... Because we talked about the fact that I wasn't hearing her warning. She just said, be safe, be careful. And she was trying to warn me, but I wasn't hearing the warning. So we're just in the process of developing some language. And, so here we are, knowing each other 10 years, married 6 years. I'm 15 years in recovery. And last week we learnt that I wasn't able to hear what she was saying and warning. And she doesn't want me to come home with broken noses at the moment or another dose of concussion.
Another head injury. Yeah. Yes.
35 concussions is a bit too much for her.
You're supposed to stop at 34.
Really. Yeah, that's what I hope.
That's really beautiful, though. I mean, that's like a shared understanding and a shared language.
It is a shared...
It's very rare.
And we've developed that. And that's the only way you can do a relationship, is you have to develop that shared language around it that doesn't come with condemnation and guilt, doesn't come with the fact, I'm going to go out tomorrow and do something risky probably, or I'll find something new, I'll find my new equivalent of 150 miles an hour in the rain, and she will hopefully preemptively help me talk that down to a moped in the scooter in the front yard.
Right.
And
it goes both ways though too. I have my own set of issues. I had an eating disorder, struggled for years, and there's still some days where I say to John, and so our language for that is, I don't feel really pretty about myself today. And so there's certain things that he'll do.
And I do them very compassionately. Things like, shut up. You're fucking hot, bitch. What the fuck is your fucking problem?
Here, eat
some fucking food. Hey, Tina, eat some food.
So we do, but it goes both ways, because I think a lot of times we're so focused on helping folks with PTSD, and we do a lot of podcasts and things like that, and people send us emails and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, Mel, you're such an angel."
Fuck.
It goes both ways.
I don't live with her. It's like, you fucking kidding me?
We all have our own stuff, but I think the important takeaway is that partners.
They partner.
Yeah, and we do. We have a language, and so we can communicate to each other.
But we've developed that language.
It's hard work. It's not easy.
It is hard. I mean, when we went through some shit to get there, I remember sitting down and watching Le Mans. It's a movie, and I remember saying, Mel, have you ever seen Le Mans? It's a Steve McQueen movie, I think it is. Has he ever seen it? I said, no. I said,
we both love classic cars, and he has a great Mustang,
Yeah, oh, man, and Steve McQueen, Le Mans, it's great. Favourite movie as a kid. I remember that movie as a kid. Let's watch it together. So we're sitting down watching this movie, and we get to a certain scene about 45 minutes in. It was a spring night, beautiful, moon watching through the big windows at this other house we're in. We had the windows open, nice breeze, and I start fucking jiggling. About 45 minutes in, I'm looking at the window. I said, you left the fucking windows open. Why'd you leave the fucking windows open? And she's just looking at me. What you left the fuck... They're going to fucking get in and they're going to fucking get me. You left the fucking window. What the fuck do you think you're doing? And I just lose my shit. And I'm walking around the house, slamming windows, checking cupboards, They're fucking coming. They're going to fucking hurt me. Why the fuck did you do... And she's just looking at me. It's like, what? And I just stopped.
I grabbed his hands and I said, something is wrong. And my first thought is, what did we just eat? I thought maybe this is chemical, but it wasn't. We hadn't eaten anything. And I said, what's wrong?
But see, she grabbed my hand. She walked to me, not from me. and she grabbed my hand and she said, "What's wrong?" She didn't seem like she was the victim of this psycho husband. She said, "Something's wrong with my husband." And there was a time where I was watching that movie with a group of people, and at this particular part, they took me off to abuse me. And this thing happened, and all of us, it just kicked in. I hadn't remembered that. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, we're in the midst of this thing, and this thing's happening. And that implosion could have been very detrimental to us, but it actually built us. And that's when we started to learn the language of walking towards, that the signaling, the language of holding hands and talking, and that she realized that, and I tried to explain it like this, that if I was in China and I was drowning and everyone else just spoke Mandarin, I would yell for help, but I would yell louder and louder to try and get them because they weren't understanding that I was drowning. And here I am drowning emotionally, and she can't hear me. She can't understand. So the louder I got was nothing to do with her. It was about what was happening in here.
Right, this feeling of distress.
Yeah. And she realized, she understood now, and it was this great epiphany looking back. At the time, it was just fucking shit show. And we sound all fucking clinical now. Fucking
hindsight and 2020 and everything.
We're awesome, fuck. But we're fucking losing my shit. She's fucking doing her best to stay connected in the moment, and we just realised that this thing was happening in real time. And she walked towards me, held my hand. I realised I was drowning. She realised the louder I got wasn't at her. And I could stand there holding her hand, screaming about how these pricks were going to try and hurt me. And I was screaming at what it felt like broken glass in my soul. I was screaming to be heard, not screaming at her. And that was a major change in our ability to communicate. But most people, when they get to that, she'll fucking storm off and lock the bedroom.
Course, yeah.
And he's stomping around going, "Bitch, you don't fucking understand." She's saying he's just texting all her friend, "The bastard lost his shit again." And it didn't. And that was one of the biggest cementing moments, because I'd never had support at that level. And she'd never been able to give, because she came from a very abusive background emotionally, with a stepfather and her mother. And the raised voices were always a trigger for her. But she walked towards and not away from, and I was able to find in that space the ability to communicate. And, I think we even finished the movie. It's like about 3 years later.
Were you guys married at this point?
We were.
Were we?
Oh, no, we may have been about to get married.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that was just a couple of months before we got married.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, what I've kind of gathered from talking to people about this is that it kind of takes somebody with that background of coming from a household or having their own experiences like that to be informed as to both what that other person is going through, but then also how to navigate that emotionally.
I don't know if Mel would have considered herself informed. I think we were still unpacking.
Well, maybe
stuff.
not intellectually, but internally informed.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that. But see, the thing I really think is she was prepared to take a risk, even if she didn't understand at that level, and to say that she was informed of it would make her sound more prepared and equipped than she actually was.
I was not.
But what she was willing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's allowed us to get whole and stay whole as a couple, is the willingness I will take responsibility for everything I do wrong, but she will grant forgiveness. And I went from in a previous relationship where if I didn't get it perfect, if I had a bad moment, then I was crucified for days and weeks for that thing. And when I came into a relationship with Mel, my challenge was that I'd have I see them as episodes and incidences. An incident is when I lose my shit and affects me. An episode is when I lose my shit and it affects us and everyone around me. And I'd have an episode. Now, previous when I had an episode, I would be chastised for weeks. But in this relationship, and Melissa taught me this, is I'd have an episode and I'd say, "Man, I fucked up. The day's fucked. The week's fucked it." She said, "No. We had a tough 15 minutes out of a beautiful 24-hour period." and that gave me the ability to be able to forgive myself and realize that she wasn't going anywhere. So I think if she was equipped in any way, it was with just a pleasant soul.
Yeah.
And she genuinely loved me and wanted to help me. Now she looks like a fucking angel because everyone looks at her and go, dude, you really were equipped and you really had your shit together. No, she didn't. She was just willing to love me whole.
I got it wrong a lot more than I got it right.
Oh, dude,
in
you
the
won't
early
fucking
days.
believe how wrong she got this shit.
But I think part of me processing my stuff and becoming informed, to use your term, was to realize that just because a guy's yelling doesn't mean that he's your stepdad and he's gonna hurt you, or
So that's what, to your point, that does give her the background to do that.
Yeah, and it because you can tell your brain, don't take this personally. He's not yelling at you. He's yelling at the universe.
And she took it fucking personally for probably 6 years.
It takes time to, and it is an acquired skill, not easily acquired, to modulate your voice when someone else is yelling, and to speak softly and to walk towards
Especially when
him.
they're large and furry.
And and you want to, and sometimes what comes out of him sounds very personal, and it's just got to all come out, and then he's able to, calm down and rationally talk and think. And I think our, even in the times that we got it really, really badly wrong, our post game is where we learned a lot of lessons.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because we would go back, we would revisit the situation, and I would say, okay, here's what I could have done better. I could have not yelled back at you when you were yelling. I could have walked towards you.
Which was really interesting, because she would take responsibility for her part of whatever it was, and I'd never experienced that before. Someone that was prepared to say, and dude, we're talking like 2% out of a 100% argument here. She go, I could have handled that better.
I could have helped you better.
So what the fuck do you mean?
I could have not called you names,
and
whatever.
She, and she's responded, but she still said, I could have helped you. And it's like, you don't have to help me. I should be able to handle it. It's like, no, you don't have to handle it. I should have. And that grace that she exhibited was...
I mean, if we were going to be a partnership, then it's not all just your issue. Even if the response you're having to something is the result of trauma that I had nothing to do with, it's now our issue, and I'm helping you. I'm in this with you. If I'm going to buy in as your partner, and I'm coming to you knowing, at least some of what your shit is, and we'll discover more shit along the way, that I'm buying in.
And that's probably the biggest gift she's given me.
Yeah.
Because, when someone is yelling at you, fuck you, bitch, fuck all women, fucking fuck, and they're just yelling, and to not take that personally and understand it's coming from another place, and understand that that's his issue, and all he's trying to do is communicate something, that he feels really threatened by the fact the window, even though I open the windows, he's not angry at me for opening the windows, he's scared, and he's a large 11-year-old boy. And to be able to click into that mode, man, that's a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing.
It's a gift, but it was a gift she didn't start with, but it was a gift she determined to develop.
I think it's a learned skill.
Yeah,
I do. I
think
it's a learned skill. Yeah.
And most couples we meet, they're not prepared to develop that grace for each other. And that's why they don't make it. They want to talk about the wrongs that they've done each other.
Yeah. I think, forgiveness is a huge thing. And forgiveness for me is, okay, in that situation where we're sitting and watching a movie, I could reasonably expect different behavior from you than to stand up and start yelling at me. But I forgive you. I release you from that standard of behavior that I had, that expectation that I had. I release you from that, because that's not what actually happened. And let's talk about now what actually did happen, you know? And so how can I do better going forward? How can I help you better, And in that situation, we didn't really have a big knockdown drag out. Like we sort of caught that one pretty quick and recognized that something was wrong.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with me. And so
What was interesting was the next 2 or 3 days later, because I felt like crap.
he wanted to keep apologizing.
And she said, okay. And sometimes in the re-apologizing, it's like, I need you to hear how sorry I am. And it's like, okay, thank you. But we've already talked about that, baby.
Remember, we apologized.
And it's because sometimes you don't, because of the nature of PTSD, the shutting down of the frontal cortex, you don't remember. And she would say, remember, we talked about that. It's like, oh, because the emotion is what's overriding.
Yeah.
And the memory of the apology is smaller than the memory of the argument. So it's like, no, remember we talked, did we? Yeah, you said sorry. Yep. And I said sorry. Yeah. Okay. And she would allow me to come back 2 and 3 and 4 times a day and apologize. And she would, instead of belittle me because I was just rehashing things, she would just remind me again, remember, we resolved this. Okay, we resolved it. We're good. We're really good. And that would, and then all of a sudden it would trickle out instead of just be this constant wash. Yeah. And that's been a massive thing for us.
It has.
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of grace in this situation, it really floors me. Like I find it to be very rare to find this much grace in a relationship.
Yeah, it's an incredible blessing to be involved in it. And it's something we want for every other couple who has to face this stuff. Because I think it's obtainable. This doesn't come... Now, I understand besides the incredible good looks and the fact that she's wonderfully hot and she speaks with a southern accent, this bitch can throw shit.
I can be just as mean as anybody. She busted
my lip in the shower one night, man. She fucking hit me. I mean, it was like... And I looked at her going, that was really good.
That's a great punch.
That was a fucking great punch. I think it was a left cross, man. She black. It's like... And it bloods out. It's like, this is awesome. And I'm standing there as a boxer just admiring the fact that I just had my lip split by some guy.
From a technical perspective.
From a 140-pound chick, who was all soapy and wet at the time. And but we're so people will look at this and think, oh, well, that's just them.
She's so nice.
And he, blah. We worked really hard. These weren't skills that we came with.
Yeah.
I just come out of 4 or 5 years of incredible recall, a broken marriage, disenfranchised, totally discouraged as a man and fucking angry at the world. She'd come out of a really bad divorce, married to a gay cowboy or some fucking shit, a total tosser. And her background and her issues, and we collided. It should have been technically a clusterfuck in the worst situation.
Yeah, an explosion, yeah.
Totally, do not do this. This is not an advice for people. But it just hasn't been. And it hasn't come easy. And people look at it and go, man, I wish, well, if you want this, then you've got to do the hard yards. You got to be prepared to, throw some tea towels and, tea towels, man. You have it when you both reach down and pick up something to throw at the other person. It just happens to be a cotton tea towel, and it goes. And then you just stand there.
It's very anticlimactic.
Yeah, totally fucking,
And you just have to laugh.
And you laugh and you go, yeah, okay. You want a glass of wine? Sure, let's have a glass of wine and a cuddle on the couch. And so glad it wasn't pottery. Or something,
Well, it's a testament to both of you, the work that it takes to reach that place.
It is, but you know what, man? Anyone can do it.
Yeah. That's what we
like. That doesn't mean it's easy, though.
No.
No,
it's not easy. But it means that if we can, they can.
Yeah.
Because I know my background's fucked up. And her background is, it's not whole.
It's way less fucked up.
But it's still fucked up. Yeah. So we're talking two broken vessels who are leaking into each other as opposed to trying to crack each other up. So we don't have a lot of grace, I suppose, when we talk to other couples and they come up with this litany of fucking excuses as to why not to make it happen. I understand my background's horrific and should not be overcome. And I should have, if I had borderline personality disorder, the average age for men with that is suicide by 37 through risky behaviour or by taking their own lives.
Right.
Women who have been violently abused by the stepfather and with an eating disorder should hate all men. Especially married to a guy who's going to large and yelling and shit and throwing shit around. It's, like, this doesn't work in today's culture. But we have worked really hard at making it work. And so if we can, we genuinely believe others can too.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of like the clean slate.
She really is. And she's not only a proponent of it, she's a practicer of it. And I think she's half hippie like that. She was stoned in her last life or something.
Funny. Very funny. I do. I think I if you're going to apologize and learn from your disagreements or your knockdown, drag out fights, whatever they may be, then you learn from them and move forward, and you don't drag that stuff up again, and you don't say, remember that time you did this to me or that to me,
And I think I'm a big proponent of taking personal responsibility. I own my shit. I've had to own my shit to survive.
Yeah.
And I think the key to our marriage working is owning our shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have talked about having your own church, and then we've spoken about grace and forgiveness, which are very spiritual topics. And as I understand it, you have a PhD in theology, right?
Yep.
Did religion and God play a role in your healing journey?
Yeah, very much so. But probably in a way different than most people think. Most people who come from my background, they want to get all bitter and twisted and, how could God allow something like this to happen? My experience has been exactly the opposite. I've felt that God weeps for people like me who have been through what I went through. And I think he's also given me the incredible grace to walk through this. And do I wish my past on anyone? No. But I'm grateful for what happened to me. I know that'll sound odd, but it made me who I am today, and I'm really comfortable with me. I like me. I've come to love me. And I never loved John 1.0.
Yeah.
But I like this guy. I like my life. It doesn't come, there's certain things you'd love to have had a chance to do differently, but that's just fruitless thinking.
Of course, yeah.
I love Christ with a passion. I'm a very passionate Christian man. My view of God has changed remarkably because of this. I think I've discovered what grace really means, to be given a second chance. I don't think I knew I don't think I ever really experienced that before.
Can you speak to that as to what that means to you?
I think as a young Christian, especially in commercial church, there's a bill of goods that goes and a behaviour that comes as a prerequisite that is nothing about a personal relationship with Christ and nothing about being loved and loving others. And grace is a concept that's sold as a revelation of a free gift that's given. And when you are so fucking broken, you can hardly get out of bed every day. When the world is so dark and dismal, you don't want to live anymore. When there's nothing that keeps you this side of glory. And yet, no, you're not loved. There's not one person in your life that loves you. There's not one memory you have that's good. There's not one relationship that stood by you. When you've got nothing, and yet for some reason, you find out that you are still loved by He who made all things. It just goes, okay, if someone in eternity loves me, then that will give me the strength to get up and go again. Yeah. I will get up and go one more day. And when you feel so unloved and unworthy, and then realise that all of a sudden you are loved, and you're found being worthy just for you, not for what you can do for the church or not for what you can give to other people, because at this point you're fucking bankrupt emotionally, morally, spiritually, and you are just loved unconditionally. It's like, it's the weirdest feeling in the world, mate. It's like, fucking, this is awesome. This is really strange to me. And you walk away with that and you carry that forward. I think if I was ever to preach again, I don't think I'd ever change the topic but grace.
Yeah.
I think I've I've experienced it in my marriage. I've experienced in Melissa's love for me. I've experienced it in things like your invitation to talk to you. That's grace for me. So why would someone want to hear about my shit? It's like, how could this turn around for good? But I remember in the midst of it, I never asked why this happened to me, why he allowed this. I only ever asked that he would turn it around for good. And just even sitting here is a testimony of grace. Yeah. That my fucked up life might actually count for something and help another man or another couple somewhere. Yeah. Man, that is the biggest fuck you to anyone who ever tried to hurt me. Yeah. I win.
Yeah, it's a beautiful gift to you.
Fuck, man, for all those who tried to break me, they lost.
Yeah.
They just lost. And I'm not in this, I'm not a big fuck you guy, but I'm a really big fuck you guy. This is all about you, Jesus. Fuck you. Everybody else.
Yeah. Are your parents still alive?
Yeah.
Okay. I know in the book you had talked about wanting to confront them and then passing on that opportunity when it presented. Was there ever, in the wake, the book came out in 2017, was there ever a moment of confrontation with that?
No. I wrote an email to my mother outlining, at that time, 12 things that I remembered had happened to me and asking her to explain why those things were allowed to happen. And I got she's a very intelligent woman, a very curtly written reply that ticked all the boxes and excused her from any legal responsibility. And I realised that, so if I was to go back, there's no statute of limitations in Australia on sexual abuse. So if I go back there and I'm put in the stand, I'm going to face a prosecutor. And that prosecutor's one job is to get them off the hook. Yeah. And they're going to do that by pushing every fucking PTSD button they can. So it would probably take 7 years. Now, it's going to take 7 years of my life and $100,000 or something like that. Are they worth that?
Yeah. They're
not worth that. There's no outcome. There's no outcome that's worth that to me. Even if they both get locked up, there's no outcome. The very best justice I can get is to have an incredibly happy, fulfilled life.
Absolutely.
In spite of what they tried to do to me. Now, why they did what they did, I don't know. When I was back there the last trip, they tried to groom my son, and that's when I just broke off. And I warned my sister, and she's seen them go after her children. And I remember sitting down and telling my little sister what they did, and the pieces fell into place, and I warned her. And I felt at that point that was the end of my obligation. I've warned my sister. I've protected my family. And the next I had to do was to protect myself, because being around them was... And confronting them, I'd have to go back. Everything I loved was in America at that stage, and I love America. America's been very good to me. I'm proud to be an American citizen. And so it just wasn't worth it. The numbers didn't add up for me.
Yeah. I have wrestled with this myself in terms of what is the best outcome from pursuing that avenue. And like you said, nothing can undo what happened to you. Like there's no real justice in this situation. Nothing will ever undo what happened to that child.
No, it won't. If you ever feel that it's worth an email, if you ever feel that it's worth you have a chance to have a conversation, then I think you have that conversation or you write that email in full knowledge that you will never get the response you want.
Yeah.
Because anyone who can abuse a boy like you were abused, abuse a boy like me, they're not going to own their shit. No. They're never going to admit to it because they'll go to jail. If they did have any interest in doing what was right, they would have presented themselves to the Guardian in Ireland or the police in Australia and said, I sexually abused my son and so all these other kids. I take full responsibility, lock me up and throw away the key. They're not fucking going to do that. Yeah. They lied to you. They've lied to everybody else, and that's what my mother does and my father does now. I had a phone call from my cousin once, saying, so I don't understand why you're running away. The girl, she was in her 30s, don't understand why you're running around saying all these things about Auntie Evelyn. Because fucking Auntie Evelyn did it, that's why. Are you just trying to position yourself? Is this a career for you now? It's like, fuck off.
A persona that
you've
created for yourself.
On. It's like, no, fuck off. You'd never say that to this if this was a woman doing this. You're only going to say that to me because I'm a man.
But also just, I mean, I have had different versions of this. Who would voluntarily choose that as a brand?
As a persona.
Yeah, who would sign up to identify
for 15 years of this shit? You're fucking kidding me? Now, I know some people who bung on the victim. They love the victim stuff, and it's like, oh, fuck. And I was like, that's just bullshit. Like, why would you... talk to my... It's not... Why would I destroy my children? Yeah. Why would I destroy my first marriage? Yeah, I'm grateful for Melissa. But I never planned to get divorced. I never planned to destroy or hurt someone else so bad that they could not stand the sight of me. I never wanted that. You'd never want to do that. Destroy a business where you're making $500,000 a year? Why would you ever do that? Destroy a church full of people? No. This was something that was done to me, not by me. And the same for you. Why the fuck would you go through however many relationships you've gone through, and now you've discovered that what happened to you as a kid, and you look back and think, oh, I just fucked all that up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's much easier the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really admire the courage and the bravery to name that this happened through your parents. Was there any fallout from you naming that in the book? And was there a lot of conflict in deciding to expose that?
Yeah, I didn't name them per se. I called them Fred and something.
Fred Mae West, right?
Fred, yeah, but aimed after the pedophile serial killers. So, man, it's probably not that. No, probably wasn't that. Yeah, not that hidden. Oh yeah, but what other fallout was going to happen? Like my little sister knew, she's the only family I've got, and fuck the rest of them.
Yeah.
Like, fuck them. You know, when you say, you know, you've got that whole fuck them attitude, you either have it or you don't, and at some point it comes down to, you know, I don't really, I'm all out of fucks. And most people that say they're all out of fucks, they're saying that because they're not. And I just was. It's like I wasn't trying to, even my parents, I never set out to hurt them. What I set out to do was own my story. I set out to try and deal with my shit. And then I realized when I did the first documentary, Stopping Traffic, that this story was resonating with people. And people would ask me from all over the world, how did you survive? And how come you didn't kill yourself? And how come you're not crazy? And it's like, okay, well, that's why I wrote Deal With It. These are the things that I learned along the way. I never stepped out and stood up to talk about them. They're not the focus of this journey. Yeah. They're no longer an issue in my life. They don't have a thing to do with my kids. Thank God for that. And I'm very grateful for my first wife for doing that. You know, she went through it. Why would she? She's not going to expose my kids to that. And then I really didn't care about the fallout. Yeah. You know, I was hurt by the fallout by the people who I thought loved me to some capacity in America, and particularly from the ministry. That hurt. That really, really hurt. And I lost some people I thought were very close friends. And that was really unfortunate, you know, but they could have really helped me.
I did have this thought as you talked about this earlier, that there's also a positive to that, right? In that it became something of a forcing function, that you found out who your real friends were at that time, and who could really be in your life long term. Yeah. And you know, even when it comes to Mel, like all of these challenges created the environment for letting you know who was going to be by your side.
Yeah, that's a really good point, mate. And there's a window of incredible isolation. Absolutely. When you go through those people and now you start to tell your story and own it. Not because you're looking for any platform, but because you want to turn the scars of shame into medals of honor. And that was a big revelation for me. A scar is something you continue to try to couple up, whereas a medal you wear proudly. I went through this and I did this, and I've come through the other side of this thing. And when you start that journey and that process, and you start to realize that there's this gap in the middle, and that gap can last for years, where there's very few voices. And even those voices, you hang on to those voices. I remember, my friends, I talk about the back deck crew in Deal With It, and what great friends they were, and Mel is great friends. Dude, I can't tell you the number of times I thought, these people must really be bored with hearing me process this shit. Because I do nothing but... Because when you're going through it, you're the worst fucking company in the world. Because you don't talk about anything else but this shit.
It's your whole world.
It's nothing. Because if you don't make it your whole world, you're never going to get better. Because you don't want to be you, but you've got to keep on processing this shit to get through it. And I find myself talk. And with PTSD, you talk circular. Because you can't fucking remember yesterday. You can't remember if you ever told this story, and you just, and you go, and you get through this and man, I'm so broken record. And people just stop falling away.
You really do find out who is going to see you whole.
Yeah.
Who's going to allow you to grow and change and process your stuff enough to see you whole. Because there are certain people around you that will want you to stay the same. Even your awful, bad PTSD reactions, we're used to those now, and so we want to keep you the same. We don't want you to move and grow and change.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Even those people that stay with you, they're used to you broken. So when you start to get better, they won't let you graduate.
Yeah.
So you end up losing 80%. Then you end up with this 20%. And out of that 20%, like 3/4 of those, the other 15%, they're thinking, well, you're this broken, fucked up person. You're my disabled friend I carry around and feel good about myself because I'm being kind to the disabled guy. And then it's like, I've got to graduate from you guys. I need to graduate from you now. Yeah. And I don't want to, but you won't allow me to grow up. So then you're down to... So now you're 2 or 3 years into it, and your circle of friends is now probably like 2. And then it's like, okay, now how do I rebuild a business, a life, or whatever it is? And that was our case. We ended up with 2 people.
But it was a good 2 people.
Yeah, they were good.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but sometimes they still can't see me as not that fucked up. It's funny. But I see them do this sometimes. And that's okay. They were being so good for so long, I find myself measuring them grace. Yeah, okay. You want to see me as that guy? That's okay.
Yeah.
Because some days I am still that guy.
Yeah. That is a good segue to the next question, though. You're almost 15 years into this journey. What is life like now?
By and large, it's fucking awesome.
It is.
It really is nice. But 15, I'd say this is the first year it's been this good. And, we've been through some, bringer the last couple of years, but it really is good, mate. Like, I didn't think marriage could ever be this good. I just didn't think sex could be this good, marriage could be this good, friendships could be this good, business could have this much opportunity, my spiritual walk could be this good. I didn't think I could be this fulfilled writing. I mean, it's
really good. I think it's
simpler.
It has taken time for once he did this years ago, he redefined his normal. It has taken 10 years at least, I think, for us to actually manifest that in our lives. We work from home, we set our own schedule, and all of those things are amazing, but it took us a while to manifest that.
And I want to talk about sex. I have a great sex life, you know.
I did have a question about
Okay.
that, and well, no,
No, go now. You talk about shagging, then it's your fault.
well, like I really appreciated that you included that in the book about the survivor's relationship to sex, because again, it's one of those things that does not get represented a lot, and
No.
You had mentioned about how difficult people who are survivors find it to ask for what they need sexually, and also having a partner who understands that their needs might be a little bit different to someone who has not gone through that regular thing. And, you know, again, like it doesn't get represented a lot. And also I think there is this proclivity to kind of fetishize it or make it weird or something like that. And that is that person's reality. Like they didn't choose to go through what they went through, but they also didn't choose what to like when it comes to sex. And, you know, in my particular case, I was a very late bloomer sexually. I probably didn't lose my virginity until 21. And I always had a very high sex drive. And I know some people who, when they realized that they had their own history with sexual abuse, their sex drive completely shut down.
Yeah.
Mine went completely the other way. And I was in a monogamous relationship, but it was like I could not get enough. And I mean, she even would say to me, like, hey, like, what's going on with you? Like, where is this coming from? And I didn't have any grasp of it because this, again, doesn't get talked about. And, you know, even when I think about, you know, the kind of porn I like, you know, a lot of my abuse came from older women. And, you know, I had no understanding of, hey, I'm enjoying this porn where, you know, there's MILF porn and it's like they're very nurturing. I mean, essentially predatory situations that are being represented in these clips. And I'm like, oh, this is what I like. And there's no connection of, oh, this thing happened to me at an age I could not understand.
I liked that you said I lost my virginity in 21, yet you'd been fucking since 6.
Yeah. But my voluntary virginity.
I understand. Because that's the same thing. I was the same late bloomer. And it's like, dude, I've been having sex since I was 4.
Same, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, this is fucking some weird shit, man.
Yeah. And it affects you in a way that very few people understand. And again, no one's talking about it. And I really appreciated that you included a section about that in the book because I don't think many people have spoken about that. And I appreciated that somebody chose to represent that.
Thank you. We did a survey with that, and the data's in the book. You know, it's very raw and it's all that sort of stuff. But that came out of a conversation we had with someone we were coaching who'd read No Working Title. And we'd had a conversation with her, and she was distinguished. She was beautiful, and we talked to her, and she was a real estate owner in Arizona, and she had this great marriage with this great kids, and she got talking to us. She said, man, I used to be a stripper and a hooker, and the shit I did. She said, but here I am in this vanilla marriage. She said, I want some rough.
Yeah.
I said, man, I just want to get after and get dirty. I want to fucking be tied up and, you know, strangled a little bit, and I want him to get after it, but he's a really good man, and he loves me, and he folds his undies at the end of the bed. And she said, how do I tell him that I just want him to fucking just rape me? Because she's saying, I want him to rewrite the scripts that I had.
Yeah.
And I want him to just own me and fuck me hard. And then in my head, I've just got my husband fucking me hard instead of all these other things I did. And I just think the sort of relationship that can handle that conversation is a rare one.
Absolutely.
And I think it needs to be, but then again, there's people who go through that sort of stuff we went through, and they just want a wonderful, safe, warm, with lots of cuddles. Yeah, and it's all very different. And it's all very different based upon the people involved in the thing.
And sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other.
And sometimes it's all in the way. Some you want to go from having cuddles to, in your case, I want you to put on a fucking granny outfit and let's run around the room. And then I just want to hold hands and cry at Kleenex ads. And it's so, but surely you should be able, with the most intimate things in your life, with the person that you love the most, surely you should be able to have those conversations. And it's no one else's fucking business what you do anyway. And
that is intimacy. It is.
That is intimacy. And I think of this friend that we had in Arizona. It's like, I just wish she would have told him, because I think this guy who was an accountant is probably sitting there going, you want me to get some 50 Shades of Grey on?
Right.
Like, he probably would have creamed his strides, and or at least what he would have done is, okay, I'm not comfortable with this, but for you, I'm going to try something that is really important to you. And even if they were to stutter and totally just collapse on the floor laughing at...
Right. Which we've done.
At some of this weird shit, and... anyway, we're not going to go into that. But, shush now. Don't laugh so out loud.
Sometimes it's funny.
It is just fucking funny. And you spend more time laughing at each other. But you know what? That's just what makes it work. Because the hard part, and even the erotic part, isn't the execution of it. It's that whole lead up to it. And even if you fall in a ridiculous mess on the floor because it didn't quite go the way you want, and you're laughing and giggling and it ends up being just a quickie. Because, you get your rocks off because just the thought that she would be willing to try it, and all of a sudden it's like, no, that's just fucking awesome. Yeah. And then you go out and have pizza and a beer.
Yeah.
The thing that I always think about is if John trusts me enough to share with me what he needs, then the very least I can do is listen. And if I'm uncomfortable, communicate that back. But it's a very precious thing that someone has trusted you with if they share their needs with you, inside or outside the bedroom. Yeah. If they're willing to open up and say, I really kind of need this, then, I need to treat that as a gift. And
I think the thing with people who have been sexually abused, what I found in the survey I did, that most of them like and want sex.
Yeah.
It's the minority that don't want sex. Yet all of us who have been abused are treated with kid gloves in this area. And really we don't. We're a little bit more leather than lace than kid gloves. We really want to get some shit on, just want to have fun and a great romp. But no one's talking about, because if you've been abused, you feel like, okay, my story of abuse, and the persona is you should be a victim and you should hate sex and you should hate men, or
it's okay if you do. They're there.
Or just that question: is this okay? Like, am I comfortable with where my partner is with this? Like, what is their relationship to it? Yeah.
And it's like all that, and as men, it's like we might be hesitant about something, and it might be perceived as being weird, but it's like, why? It's like, it's nothing to do with anybody else. But when it comes to sex and sexuality, we've overcome we've got so much to still overcome, and it has to be in a place that is safe. And you don't know if you don't venture into that area and have that conversation, because the biggest thing is when you start to open at an area is someone looking at you going, are you fucking kidding me right now? Yeah. And the thought of that happening is enough for you to never engage in that conversation. And by not engaging in that conversation, you're not only disingenuous, the relationship is doomed for failure. Because it'll be something, and I'm sure you know this, brother, it'll be something which you're dragging in one side and then over here you're doing porn. Or you're dragging in there feeling totally unfulfilled. You can't get your rocks off because it's not working, but over here getting porn you can. Yeah. And that's the problem. You're not able to blend this most intimate and important thing in your entire life. And I think that's the most vulnerable conversation you'll ever have.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of spade work that has to happen before you can have the sex conversation. Like, here's what I need in the bedroom. You got to have a language with each other first, to where there's certain words that John will use that I know, okay, stop what you're doing and listen, because this is important.
And those conversations happen across our entire relationship.
Right, and so there's a lot of spade work that happens before you get up to the sex
And
conversation.
when you
Go ahead, please.
So when you understand that intimacy is the extension of everything else, and everything else is the extension of intimacy, those same languages and conversations, they flow across both. And you don't. She would never call me freak over here on this, and it's not. And I would never call her freak over here. But yet, if she's saying this is important to her, then that becomes a free flow conversation over everything.
Yeah, and something that did occur to me as we were having this conversation, it's the same set of skills in a different lens, right? It's the empathy and the grace, but again, we're talking about things that happen behind closed doors, and because they happen behind closed doors, there is an inherent privateness to the conversation that stops it from being discussed as freely. But then, something that I have talked about on the podcast before is one of my own issues is confusing sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy. And because I had so many adverse experiences with family early on, and that's the birthplace of emotional intimacy and safety, that got very muddled for me. And when it hasn't been muddled for you as a child, that carries into adulthood, right? And sex then becomes something that, even though it is a purely physical act, becomes emotionally very muddled. And even that conversation of, can I ask for what I want? Is it okay for me to ask for what I want? Becomes something that is very complicated for someone who has gone through that.
So you made a statement then that sex is a purely physical, and then over here you've got emotional. I don't think that's the case. I think they're very connected.
I agree with you. I just mean objectively. Like in a relationship, I don't think you can have one without the other. But I think when you have gone through what we've gone through, the two seem separate, but then are also
they're very intertwined
and muddled.
And particularly as men, women will normally see its emotion is extended physically. Whereas we would just see fucking as fucking over there, and then we'd have a conversation. So we can have a conversation about fucking, go and fuck, and then come back and have another conversation. Whereas when we understand that really what we're talking about here includes all of this, then it really gets weird. Because then all of a sudden we're talking about it. Now we're talking about, I want to do this, and then that taps into a whole range of emotional shit. And then when you go back and try and do this, you're walking around with a wet wiener. So that the whole fucking thing gets really So dude, we need to jack up on fucking Viagra and get our shit on. So this whole conversation becomes very complex on multiple levels. So you might try and have a go at it, but you might need 3 or 4 goes at it just to tick the fucking box. And you've got to have a particularly special sort of person who's not going to get into judgment and condemnation and a whole range of other. And you've got to be tenacious enough to understand you're trying to solve a fucking problem over here. And I think part of it for men is we've got to solve a fucking problem over here. We need to work this shit out now because we understand it's going to affect theirs. So there's all those other things. And don't forget, we've been told sexually as men that it needs to be all about fucking cuddles and rainbows and unicorns. It's just about getting your fucking rocks off 98% of the fucking time, and then 2% is a cuddle. I'm just saying that thing, So I think, particularly at the front end of a relationship, it's a really dangerous conversation to have.
For sure.
But if you're not prepared to have that dangerous conversation, if you want to sort your relationship out quick, smart, and see if it's worthwhile investing in it, it's like you have that conversation.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those forcing functions. It is.
And
you can be in it for the long haul or you can't.
Yeah. And it's like,
And John and I have some very specific language that we developed early on. Like if he tells me he's been practicing something, like I've been practicing this conversation.
Yeah, but you need to clarify that's just emotional, not sexual. It's not like I'm in the bedroom getting my kink on.
No.
You haven't been doing air thrusts?
Yeah. If he says
like Tom Jones.
I need to talk to you, and I've been practicing what I'm going to say. That just for him to say, I've been practicing what I'm going to say. And that was
a really important term of language that we used, because it would be about anything in life. It's like, I'm wanting to talk to you about it. And I'd often go for a walk and I'd practice it. because I know when I'm talking to her, sometimes it's like this, and I'm thinking it's like this.
Yeah.
So I go for this, and I say, it's like, I've been practicing this thing I need to talk to you about. And she'll go, why is he fucking being all weird and shit?
I know I need to stop and listen. And so because we developed that sort of language around having a very important conversation, so when it comes to talking about sex, he'd say, I need to talk to you about something important. And if he said that, I'm like, okay, I stop and listen, And
I think that key, one of the things she said is it's important.
Yeah.
And being able to put weight on it. Whereas in our society today, we're all about the weight that sex means to a woman and the importance of it. We're not concerned so much about the importance that sex means to a man. So they're not equally weighted conversations anymore. Oh, well, I really need to be cuddled. It's about you meeting my emotional needs. Bitch, I fucking just want to get laid. So that's just as important as you needing a fucking cuddle. So just let's do this. Let me just give you the best 2.5 minutes of your life, and then we'll cuddle for 15 minutes. You're going to end out the window here. That's not our problem, but I've talked to men like that, and it's like, oh man, I've got to go through. I've got to buy her a gift, take her to dinner, give her a cuddle, and then it's fucking 11 o'clock and I can't get laid. It's like, just fuck before you go, bro, and then just take her to a French restaurant.
But that's in relationships that don't involve someone who's had trauma,
And you overlay your shit, my shit, or anybody else's shit, be it male or female, and
it gets complicated.
And it gets complicated because sometimes women who have been sexually abused are very sexually aggressive.
Yeah.
And they want to be allowed to be sexually aggressive. And
I mean, it's just a different version of this is it okay conversation.
It is. Yeah.
It is.
And it's just, I think a lot of times what we find in folks that we're coaching is, are they willing to have the hard conversations with one another,
Yeah, that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Whether it's about sex or about something else that you're needing that you're not getting. Yeah.
Those are amazing insights, and I'm really glad we ended up touching on that topic.
No worries, man.
So, looking back, can you summarize the insights that you have kind of taken from the last 15 years of this journey?
It's a great question.
I think it makes me think of that meme that we made that there are just as many roads to recovery as there are people in recovery.
Yeah, and there are. I think give yourself grace because you'll make it. If you can accept that you're going to make this thing. My old boxing coach says, tuck your chin and throw punches. And if that is your attitude, then you will make it. You need to be relentless, and you need to be resilient. And if you'll be relentless and resilient, you'll make it. If not, you're fucked, so give up now. Serious. No, it is. You'll be a victim for the rest of your days.
Yes.
And if you're going to be a victim, just fuck off and be a victim to victim town with everybody else. And that's okay for you, because that's the definition of your life. But if you really want to make it out of this thing, you have to be relentless and resilient. Mm-hmm. And it's going to cost you everything to get whole. And there's, unfortunately, that's my experience, and it's the experience of anyone. Think of your own life, mate. Resilience and relentlessness.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can still be here, having not topped yourself at the age of 40. You're coming into suicide bracket now. You've had recall at the right time, congratulations. And now you're going to come through this period. And you're either going to scrape your shit together and make it, or you're fucked. Because then you're going to be, 45, 50? Total washout, no relationships, nothing. It's like, I'm fucking useless. I can't. The only way you make it is to be relentless and resilient. And then if you're relentless and resilient, brother, life's beautiful for you. Because you've got what I never had. You've got people who've been there before you. Mm-hmm. Mm. You've got insight. And you decided, fuck it all, I'm going to take a year and I'm going to assemble my shit at the age of 40 I'm gonna suck the life and marrow out of these fuckers. I'm gonna learn all their good shit, and I'm gonna fucking go on and be awesome. Fuck y'all.
It's great.
I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna be fucking awesome. How you going, John? You're so fucked, bro. I'm over here with all your shit's fucking great. No, but I really admire what you've done.
Thank you.
You took a year and you just thought, I'm going to suck the marrow out of everything, because that's a set of gonads. That's resilience and relentlessness.
Yeah.
I'm going to drag my shit around. I'm going to take fucking photos. I'm going to learn some shit and put some shit together for other people. Man.
I think that's why John's flower is the daffodil.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, oh, that's cute. He has a favorite flower. Daffodils.
That fucker comes up every year, man.
They come up first every year in the hardest conditions.
Hardest conditions.
They are absolutely
Snow.
relentless and resilient. And they come up, I mean, you can go to an old home site where the home's been torn down and it's like 50 years ago that there was a house.
Yeah, baby. I'm fucking still here, bitches.
Still daffodils in the yard. The house is long gone.
We were at some place in Alabama.
Yeah.
Where there was this old house that had been there.
It was a 150-year-old cabin.
And the whole front yard was covered with daffodils. And we asked the lady, where, she said, oh, I don't know. They've come up
just come up every year.
For decades now.
Wow.
And it's like, yeah. So let it be, Lord.
Can you tell us about the Give Them a Voice Foundation?
Yeah. We focus on anti-human trafficking and post-traumatic stress recovery. The recovery stuff, I've been very blessed at the connections I've made through that. And I think part of it has been, I know my story is bad, and I'll talk to some of the elite fighters, war fighters from around the world, and they'll go, I'll never change my shit for your shit. And I'll go, bro, I'm never changing my shit for your shit. So let's just have a conversation about how we get whole and change the world and make it a better place. And so it's been a real privilege for us to do that. And, we do everything from podcasts to speaking at seminars to helping organisations and to coaching individuals and running a food bank for veterans and police and trafficking survivors that can't make it. Yeah. So, we're pretty diverse in what we do, and it's based upon the needs we have. And I love to write, and I'm probably an author and a poet above anything else. And we're working on a couple of novels at the moment that publishers have said will be the next John Wick, and it's all dealing around the true events that we've been involved in, and trying to make trafficking exposed and a conversation, and understanding that every level of government is involved in this thing. It's the only way a $150 billion a year enterprise can survive globally is with government endorsement. So we need to get pissed off at some level about what's happening. Yeah. So that's what we do.
So we were at the end now. If people wanted to connect with you, how can they find you?
drjohnaking.com. Have a look at the website. Drop us an email. If they're not a prick, they can give us a phone call. If they are a prick, I just won't return a call.
We're on pretty much every social media platform at Dr. John A. King.
Yeah, so they can do that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we are at time, and I just
good, mate, because I'm fucking hungry. You know
Me too. We've been locked in for quite a while.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to say that I really appreciate the candor, the honesty, the bluntness that you both showed up with today. I think this is a conversation that needed to happen. It's one that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. And I think it's one that people will get a lot of value from, and one that I personally really appreciated. So thank you both very, very much.
Yeah, well, thank you, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for turning up with your best game on. We really appreciate it. We do.
Thank you, guys.